the committee members and see whether we're ready to start in a few minutes. Okay, you guys just sit back, relax and enjoy. Get to know the people next to you, you know, look at the person in your left and right, your neighbors, whoever is there, say, malu apa bosku? Yeah. Get to know your friends, don't worry, you get to know them. And again, those of you at the back, if you want to, please come in front and enjoy a closer look at our debaters, so you get to listen. I think sometimes it's a lot easier when you can see them clearly and you can listen to them closer, then you get a bit more information. If you sit at the back, sometimes you might be tempted to use the phone. Which brings me to my next reminder, for those of you who have phones, pretty much everyone, please put your phones on silent mode. Okay, if you haven't done it yet, please do it now. I'm gonna do it. Where's my phone? Okay. Please put your phones on silent mode. Even better if you want to switch it off, I think that would be even better. You know why? So they can enjoy the debate fully. We don't want any phone suddenly ringing and interrupting the debate. Also, we are streaming live, so we want to make sure that the recording is nice and clean. Yeah. So please take your phones, silent it, mute it, or if you can, switch it off entirely. If any phone rings, I will take it and I hide it from you. Okay, I'm a magician. I can hide things. What was I going to say? Yes, and some of you are on laptops, that's fine, but make sure your laptop is muted. I don't want ting ting, Windows wants to update your computer. No, don't want. Ting ting, not an antivirus. Okay, don't want. Please make sure your laptop is also muted. If you want to take notes, by all means, please take notes. But sometimes in a debate, it's nicer to just listen and enjoy, because I'm not sure if there's a recording available. Will there be a recording available? I think it will be online, right, Aaron? It's going to be online, yeah. So there will be a recording online based on what my friend Aaron is recording, so you can probably check that out later on, okay? Just waiting for a few more people to come in. And toilets, if you need to go, better go now, okay? The hall is, as you can see, is quite cold. I'm wearing long sleeve also, I feel a bit cold. So if you need to go to the toilet, go now, because during the debate, usually it's very intense. So you don't want to miss out on any important points while going to the toilet. So you need to just exit the hall through here, turn left, go all the way to the end on the left corridor over that side. That's the toilet. Okay, a lot of people going now. Go quick. All the bladder all opening already. Come, go. I say shh, shh, shh. All the bladder go already. Go. Okay, go. Very good. Okay, so please use it now before we begin. So the yeah, go on. Started already. Started. I say shh, shh, shh. Everybody go. This is the Malaysian way. Very good. Okay, we let them go and come back. Okay, we let them go and come back. My name is Ross. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be the MC for today. Not the moderator, but the MC. We've got the moderator's name, Mr. Joshua, very accomplished. Our speakers today from the atheist side, which I think is this side. That side. I'm not sure which side. Atheist side. Will be Mr. Willie. You have probably read his bio outside, very accomplished speaker, and Mr. Pastor Samuel Nesan, who will be the Christian side. They've actually debated before. In fact, 7 years ago, the two same people that you see today actually debated 7 years ago with the same moderator. So today is like a rematch for them, showdown of the champions. What? Who won the last time? I think the last time, I could be wrong, but I think the last time was the atheist side, if I'm not mistaken. Willie was the one who was the champion, I believe, yes, for the voting. Oh, they're coming in. Jeng, jeng, jeng. Jeng, jeng, jeng. Let's give them a big round of applause. Come on, guys. Yeah. Welcoming our debaters. Wow, got music also. Nice. Choose some better music. Music. Choose like some Avengers song, It's like lounge music. So let our speakers get settled in and wait for a few more people to come back from the toilets. Just give them a few minutes. So I actually am a student at University Malay. I'm doing my Masters in Educational Psychology. I actually applied to MCKL to be a lecturer. I could have been a lecturer here. My friend Mr. Adriel. Adriel, where are you? Where is he? Adriel? There he is, right at the back there. Okay, so Mr. Adriel was actually my classmate when we were doing psychology at Help University, and then when he applied here, I asked, can you help me submit my resume? I also want to teach psychology at MCKL. I've heard good things about this college, and submitted my application, and it got rejected. Okay, because what happened was, my hair used to be very big. If any of you know me, my hair now is very curly. It used to be about 5-10 times this big, like David Arumugam size big. And so when the person saw my resume, he said, the hair like this, cannot. Not academic enough. What to do? That's what you get when you apply to Mrs. Moy College Kuala Lumpur. MCK, Methodist College Kuala Lumpur. Comedian. She's not here, right? Okay, good. It's alright. It's good to make fun. It's good to have jokes. I'm glad you're laughing. You know why? Because if you don't laugh, if you're too tense, it's very hard to absorb anything from today's debate. It cannot be too tense. You must be relaxed a bit. You must be willing to open your mind, but not so big that it falls out. Okay. Now, I also want to remind you that there are some books being sold outside. These are primarily Christian Apologetics books. If you follow Ravi Zacharias, his books are available on sale outside. I think one is 30, one is 40 and 45, if I'm not mistaken. You can go and check it out and buy if you want. Available outside at a very good price, a steal price, so please go and buy it if you would like to know more. Yeah, Ravi Zacharias Ministries books. Still got people coming in, so we'll just wait a few more minutes. Okay, those of you at the back, please come in front, don't be shy. Yeah? This is not subject lesson, we're not studying anything today, we are debating. Okay, but you know, they call it a debate, but I like to call it a dialogue. It's not so serious, like we're going to kill people like that. Huh? And your papers, please keep your papers with you very safely, because we're going to be doing, as I said earlier, voting. Yeah, we're going to be doing 2 voting, because you guys got 2 papers, right? Say yes. Yes. Very good students. Very good MCK. Okay, so your first paper will be doing a before and after. Okay, the moderator will be explaining that later on. And just remind you guys, don't lose that paper, because we need it to calculate the before and the after votes. Yeah. What's the topic for today? Who can tell me what's the topic? Does God exist? That's right. So it's going to be a fun discussion. I've emceed the previous debate between our speakers on can humanity be good without God? It was a pretty good debate. All right. Still see people coming in. Come. Those at the back. Should tell some jokes. You want to hear some jokes or not? My jokes are very edgy, just so you know. Very edgy. Make people see it's uncomfortable, but it's okay. It's just jokes. Just laugh. Just laugh. You know, I always feel when I MC these atheist and Christian debates, atheists should be very thankful to Christians. They should thank God for Christians. Because you know why? Without Christians, atheists got nothing to do. Isn't it? We are giving the atheist stuff to write about. Without atheists, you know, Richard Dawkins had nothing to talk about. Nothing. Because atheists are the one, you know, always intellectually debating Christians. You can't debate other religions, right? They only debate Christians. Am I right, really? You only debate Christians. You cannot debate Buddhists, because Buddhists, you know, traditionally Buddhists don't really have a spiritual God. Buddhists, you know, think about suffering and detachment from the material world and the noble eightfold path. You know, Buddhists don't actually have a God per se. So, you know, atheists cannot debate that, because they need to debate someone with a God. Atheists cannot debate Hindus, because Hindus got so many gods. My God, Indians, you know, debate one God, another God will appear. That's why Indian gods always got a lot of hands, because they're trying to keep track how many gods are in the Hindu religion. They also don't know. So I always got more hands appearing. People always ask me, you know, Ross, why Indians got so many gods? I say Indians are very spiritual people, that's why. We call the Indian priests in the temple, we call the Indian priests the Kudi Karan. The Kudi Karan. If you don't know what Kudi Karan means, please turn to your Indian friend, ask them. Oh, sorry, MCK, no Indians, Ironically located in brickfields, of all places. Little India, no Indians here. Kudi Karan means spiritual. Okay lah. It's a joke to say that you are a minority. The fact that one person raised the hand confirmed the joke. Thank you. Alright. So who I talk? Buddhists, they cannot debate, atheists cannot debate Buddhists, no God, cannot debate Hindus, too many gods, and they cannot debate, you know, Muslims, because, you know, Islam is a religion of peace. I told you, edgy is the Malays are laughing. It's okay. The Malays are laughing. Thank God. Inshallah. Okay. People always, whenever I make jokes about Muslims and Islams, and my friend, I have many Muslim friends, they always ask, Ross, can you make fun of Muslims? We won't get offended. Hello, this is KL, not Kelantan. Okay. Nobody is going to whip me here yet. Alright, but it's good, it's nice to see we've got a mixture of different religions here. We've got some Muslims, we've got some Christians, we've got atheists. I'm sure there are many of you who are Buddhists and Hindus, and a lot of mixture, which is always good, because you know, when we have a religious debate or discussion like this, we want to get as many different viewpoints sitting here so you can enjoy the debate. You know, it's always nice to enjoy with the group. How you came late? I told all my best jokes already. Lama. But never mind. I've got some friends here from university. I got some friends from a lot of different places actually. Family also is here. Somewhere my brother is here somewhere. Oh, there. Hi, Richard. That's my brother. Also an MC. Okay, I'm just buying time. Oh, we got offertory collection. Okay, let me just find James. James, where are you, James? Let me know when you're ready to start. James or Alyssa? I just want to hear from the Christian Fellowship group. They are the ones who have put this together. Very thankful. Oh, Alyssa is here. Sorry, Alyssa is over here. She's going to say so. So, ladies and gentlemen, could you put your hands together for the Vice President of the Christian Fellowship of MCKL? Just give us a few words of welcome.
Thank you, Ross. Just want to say good morning, everybody. Thank you. Greetings on behalf of MCKLCF. Thank you so much for spending your Saturday morning with us on the 4th edition of this debate. Later, the moderator will just tell you a little bit more about actually generally how the, well, not to say Christian versus atheist, but like so to say how that the dynamics of that is like in Malaysia now. He will update you guys. Just want to clear this all up, that this is all in friendly stature, that we are not here to bash anybody, and that no opinions are alright guys, sure. No opinions are condemned here. So thank you so much for your time, and I just hope that you will receive much from this. Just sit back, relax, and have an enjoyable time listening to these intellectual people. Thank you very much.
Nobody will bash. What are you saying? Christians are very good at bashing people. We love to bash people, right? Well, some of us do. Crusades. Anyway, getting you guys to warm up a bit. So I need you guys to get a little bit more warmed up because you guys seem a bit stiff. Please turn to your neighbor and just give them a high five. Can you give everybody a high five? High five your neighbor. Sir, don't be neighbor. Come.
High five.
Very good. High five to your neighbor. High five to the neighbor. And get to know your people next to you, left and right. Okay, just a reminder, so I'm going to point this out again because people are still sitting in the middle here. There's a webcam here, and this webcam is going to be broadcasting this debate live to the US. Say again? It's already broadcasting, oh my god! I said all the Muslim jokes, never mind. Inshallah, okay. Come on guys. Alright, so we're already broadcasting live to the US, so from those of you who are in the US, hello! I got so many US jokes that I cannot make. What? You want to say something? I heard 1 million. No. In Malaysia, we don't talk in millions, we talk in billions. Learn from Najib. Alright, so we're broadcasting to the US. So for those of you who are sitting here, just a reminder, photographer also, try not to stand up and block the view there if you happen to be passing through, and don't talk too much because it can pick it up. Okay, the webcam is just over there with the phone, so try not to chat too much amongst yourself because we don't want it to ruin the quality of the video we're capturing. Even around here, always when the speakers are speaking, we listen and we give them our fullest attention. Now, one reminder, my last thing that I'm going to say before we invite our speakers and the moderator is that please do not go back from today with what is known as an echo chamber. An echo chamber happens when you only listen to one side that you want to hear. So for you, if you're Christian here, please don't just listen to what Samuel has to say. If you're an atheist, don't just listen to what Willie has to say. You have to be willing at a debate to put aside your own bias and listen to other people's opinions. Hey, they are busy guys, Samuel every day is preaching. I know how busy he is. He's coming here so that all of you here who are non-Christian can also appreciate a different side of opinion. Willie is also a busy man. I don't know what atheists do in their free time other than rationalize morality and debate Christians, but he's a busy man. Very busy. You read his things, so many things. Head of the Atheist Society in Malaysia and all that. Busy man. He's not here for the atheists. Atheists already know him. He's here for everybody else to enjoy and appreciate a different opinion. There's a quote by Aristotle. It goes something along the lines of, it takes an educated mind to entertain a thought without accepting it. Something like that. Is it something like that? I better quote it properly. I wrote it down. I forgot the quote. Actually, it's a wonderful quote. And if anything, I would encourage you to live today in this debate using that quote. And the quote goes something, okay. It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. So today, guys, I want you to sit back, relax, and be entertained by both sides of the coin. Don't just listen to what you want to hear. Challenge yourselves today to listen to what both speakers have to say. All right? Are you guys excited? You can do better than that. Are you guys excited? Alright, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for all our two debaters and the moderator for today. Let's give them a big round of applause. Mr. Joshua, Pastor Samuel, and Mr. Willie. Welcome them all to the stage. And a last minute reminder, if you've just come in, please make sure your phones are on silent. Yeah, we don't want any interruptions during our event. Thank you very much.
Test mic.
Test mic. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Methodist College KL, and greetings to our friends in the US. Today we are carrying on a debate that has been going on for the last 7-8 years between Christians, or more specifically Samuel Nesan and his young apologist group, which now is known as Explain Apologetics. Now, I moderated the first debate in Malaysia between an atheist and a Christian apologist 7-8 years ago, between the two of them. So this is kind of like a rematch of sorts, because there have been two other debates that have taken place between the Christians and the atheist community. The second one was done on the question of evolution. The third debate was done last year on the question of morality. Can people be good without God? And today we're going back to the original topic, which was debated 7-8 years ago, which is the existence of God. Both debaters are very familiar with the other person. They are good friends. Willie and Samuel know each other very well. So this is, in a sense, a kind of exhibition debate. But this is not a dialogue, right? This is a debate where marks will be given by the audience. The audience will be the ones who will judge the outcome of this debate. So before we begin this debate, we are going to let you do the pre-debate voting, okay? Now, in your hands, you have a small sheet of paper, and this is your starting position, all right? So if you believe that there is no God, then put there N for no. Or does God exist? No, right? If you believe that God does exist, before you've heard any of their arguments, please put yes with a Y. Now, if you choose to stay on the fence, which you can, regardless of whatever position you hold, you can put a U, which is undecided. Undecided. Now, once you have written that letter, Y or N or U, you will pass it to one of the ushers that will collect these papers. And while that's happening, I will explain the rules of how the debate is going to be done. Okay, the ushers are coming along with red bags. So please put that white sheet of small sheet of paper. Don't put two, just put one. Keep. Yeah, no coins. We are not collecting money. Okay, so just put one sheet of paper, not two. Put one sheet of paper into the bag to declare your starting position, all right? And over the course of today, during the debate, as you hear both sides, if you are convinced to shift your position, you may do so, or you can shift to undecided. That can also work, all right? Now, as the papers are being collected, I will want to take you through the whole process of how the debate is going to be done. The debate formal will be done in 5 sections. The first section is opening speeches by both sides. Each is given 15 minutes. We will start with the Christian side, followed by the atheist side. The second section is the rebuttal. Each side is given 12 minutes to respond to whatever that has been said. And there will not be any new arguments that should be brought forward in this second section. They should be just responding to what has been said. The third is the cross-examination section. This is the kind of the interesting part where each side gets to question the other side, and each is given 8 minutes. And then after this section is done, both sides do their cross-examination. They will each be given a chance to respond in kind. So this is the fourth section, the response to the cross-examination. And then finally, in the last section, we will have the closing statement by each of the both sides. Now, based on the debate that was done last year, which Ross was moderating, we had a discussion and we agreed that both debaters were okay with this, that we will allow Samuel to close and do his closing statement at the last, he will have the last say in that sense. Okay, right? So yeah. Then after the closing statements for both speakers, we will have the Q&A session, and this is where the audience, in that sense, gets to cross-examine the various speakers. But in this case, there won't be any microphones, so you will need to go onto the Slido link up there and post your questions. And I will be selecting the questions, alternating between each of these speakers, and each of the speakers is only given 1 minute to respond to the question. All right? So that is the gist of our debate. So stakes are high, there will be marks, there will be a winner, there will be a loser. So get yourself prepared for an interesting morning. Now I'd like to introduce my timekeeper, Nicholas, and I'll explain how the time system works. Now, 1 minute before your end of your time, you will be given 1 ring of the bell. And when your time is up, we will give you 2 rings of the bell. So we will encourage you to finish your speech in the next 30 seconds or 1 minute or so on, right? As has been said, the audience is the judge, right? So there is no judges sitting somewhere, giving points and stuff like that. You are the ones who give the judge and decide. Okay, so now that we have introduced the speakers and the timekeeper and the rules of the debate, let the debate begin. So without further ado, I will invite Mr. Samuel Nesan to begin the debate with his opening speech. Let us put our hands together to welcome Samuel.
Right, good morning everyone.
Good morning.
Before I start, I just want to thank Willie for allowing me this opportunity to debate him once again. The last time we did a one-on-one debate was 7 years ago, and I can't really say I enjoyed that very much, and I hope to enjoy this one today. But before I go any further, can I ask, how many of you, an honest question here, Sunday tomorrow, you're encouraged to be, if you're a Christian, to be honest, the day before Sunday at least. Monday, no problem. How many of you here came here to watch me getting crushed in the debate today? Can I see your hands? One. Okay. Thank you for coming. I just want to say thank you very much for coming. You are the guys I came to speak to. And once again, welcome every one of you to it's not a dialogue, it's a debate where we both are going to present our positions. We are both friends, and I respect him. I'm not sure he can say the same thing about me. But the thing is this, that I want to clarify what is it that we believe when we say that does God exist. So the question of debate, can I have my slides up please, is does God exist? Yeah, so I'll be presenting 2 contentions today. One, that there are no good reasons to deny God's existence. And 2, that there are good reasons to affirm God's existence. Can we pause the time first? Which one is it? Is it the top one?
The middle 2 buttons.
Okay.
The middle goes back, the down goes up.
Okay. The middle go forward. Okay. Just a second. Oh, the middle. Okay. It's not working. Okay, the middle one. Okay. All right then. I will start again. All right, so I'll be making 2 contentions today. Number 1, there are no good reasons to deny God's existence. For this part, I will just wait for Willie to make his opening presentation and respond to them to show why there are no good reasons to deny God's existence. And number 2, I'll be making the presentation that there are good reasons to believe God exists. For this, I'll be making a couple of claims. The first one, the cosmological argument, which you may be familiar with, and I know a friend of mine, Stephen Fung, has presented this here yesterday. So the cosmological argument goes like this. Premise 1, everything that begins to exist has a cause. Now, how do you know this? To deny this would be to assert that things could just pop into existence from nothing. And the question is, if anything exists, there has to be a cause for its existence. This is not a statement of ignorance, rather it's a statement based on what we do know, on how the universe operates and everything within it. Number 2, the universe began to exist. Well, To deny this would be to assert that the universe was infinite in the past. And if this assertion comes up, I will just demonstrate it philosophically. It's impossible to assert an infinite universe because to assert an infinite space of time simply doesn't exist in the real world. There are finite events that take place. And if, let's say, you start from the infinite universe, let's say if you could name the starting point of the infinite universe in infinity past as A, and where we are today as X, how long will it take to go from A to X? Or rather, if you work backwards, how long would it take to go from X back to A? If your starting position is it takes an infinite amount of time to go back to A, then it would take an infinite amount of time to come from A to X, which means it would never reach here. So you can't have an infinite series of past events. That simply wouldn't make sense. And it's safe to say that scientists today believe that the universe came into existence some 13.7 billion years ago in a cataclysmic event known as the Big Bang. This is consistent with what we understand about science, and this is consistent philosophically. Third, it follows, therefore, necessarily that the universe has a cause. Now, the beautiful thing about this syllogism is that you may not agree to number 3, but if 1 and 2 hold true, the conclusion 3 necessarily follows whether you believe it or not. So the question really is, what is the cause of the universe? And here I want to present 5 different causes, which I think are the characteristics of who or what cause the universe needs to have. Number 1, it needs to be spaceless, and number 2, timeless. Why? Because whatever caused the universe needs to transcend, to go beyond the space-time framework, since space-time, the framework exists after the Big Bang, not prior to it. The cause would also have to be non-physical and immaterial, because whatever caused the universe has to precede the material and the physical, because it caused the material and the physical. Finally, it has to be personal. Now here you may be tempted to say, why personal? That seems a little all too convenient. Well, here I would simply say that the reason it has to be personal is because if the conditions or whatever is required to create the universe is already in existence, then the universe would also have to exist simultaneously. For example, if the conditions to create ice is water and 0 degrees centigrade, then if those 2 conditions are met in eternity past, then ice would also have to exist necessarily in eternity past. But the only reason you can have the cause of the universe existing first and the universe coming into being at a later point of time is because of personal agency. A person may have the capability and the potential to create, but may choose to do so as and when he pleases. And that's why we may have the cause can be eternal and uncaused, but the effect itself can come into being at a later time. So I submit to you that the only thing that fits these 5 conditions, timeless, spaceless, immaterial, non-physical, and personal, is an unembodied mind, which I'd like to call God. Number 2, the moral argument. Now, Willie and I have debated this before in the last debate we have, so I thought it would be good if you can bring it up again and go through some of the things we did the last time. The moral argument simply goes like this: if God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. You may think that you can assert some sort of objective morality if God doesn't exist, but what gives you the right to do so? For example, you may say that the majority of people agree with you. The majority of people agree that this is the right thing to do. But so what if the majority, the rest of the minority, are not in any way compulsory for them to follow what the majority says? To give you an illustration, imagine all of us floating aimlessly in space. If we were floating aimlessly in space, who is to look at another person and say, you are upside down? For all you know, there is no ground under our feet. But what happens if 99% of the people floating in space happen to be tilted at a particular angle? Can they therefore look at the other guy who does not conform to their angle and say, you just happen to be upside down? No, even though you're 99% of you agree that you're tilted in this way, you have no objective grounds to look at the other person and say you're wrong. So if God doesn't exist, where do you get the grounds to judge someone and say you're morally wrong? And the illustration I gave in the last debate was of a knife. You wouldn't buy a blunt knife and you would consider a blunt knife to be bad simply because it fails its purpose. Now, if you could imagine the knife talking back to you and saying, well, I've never hurt anyone. don't call me bad. I've never caused anyone pain or even cut anyone. But that's precisely the point. A knife was made to cut. Its failure to fulfill its purpose determines its failure as a being. It's bad because it fails to fulfill its purpose. But notice something here. Only the Creator can give purpose. The Creator gives purpose. The ability of the object to fulfill the purpose makes it good. The failure of the object to live up to its purpose makes it bad. But regardless, the object cannot create a purpose for itself. It exists for a purpose. It has to identify what that purpose is and not merely invent it. And this leads to premise 2. That if objective moral values, and if God does not exist and objective moral values and duties do not exist, we do find that objective moral values and duties exist. You may have looked at people and said that what they did is evil. Certain actions that maybe I don't want to speak about, but if you look at some atrocities in the world, you find a sense of resentment because you believe what was done was evil. What are you comparing this action to when you call it evil? And I say it exists because you're comparing it to an objective standard, God. Now, this doesn't mean you need to believe in God in order to do good, but good would be meaningless if God does not exist. It would just be social pressures, social conformities, and nothing more. And to disobey them would be basically to be acting out of line and not evil. Therefore, if objective moral values and duties do not exist unless God exists, but since objective moral values and duties do exist, it follows necessarily that God exists as the objective basis. Now, how long do I have left? 7 minutes, okay. In the remaining time, I'll focus on my third argument, which is the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I've debated another atheist from America on this before, and I thought it would be good to bring this in, because it takes the debate more from just does God exist to arguing that the Christian God exists, which is not the subject of today's debate, but it takes it a little bit further in terms of being able to pinpoint. So number one, if the 5 facts that I'm going to present now concerning the death of there are 5 facts concerning the death and resurrection of Jesus. Number 2, if they are true, they prove that God raised Jesus from the dead, in which case they prove that the Christian God exists. So what are these 5 facts? And that can be historically verified. Number 1, the Old Testament in the Bible. Well, I just lost my screen. The time. Do you have it back? Yeah, I'll just go on without it then. The 5 facts. Number 1, the Old Testament predicts the resurrection and death of Christ. You can look at passages like Genesis 3:15. I don't have time to get into detail, but right from the early chapters of Genesis, the very first book in the Bible, the idea of a coming Messiah whose death and resurrection is inherent. Now, this is Willie's. Okay, thank you. I wish I could have a little bit more time because of the interference. Let me buy a bit of time. So, in Genesis 3:15, it says, I will create enmity between you and the woman, between the offspring and hers, and he will crush your head and you will strike his heel. Now, this is in the very early chapters of the Bible, God speaking to our first parents, Adam and Eve, promising a savior to come that will crush the serpent, which is a symbol of ultimate victory, but which will come at a dear cost of losing one's life. You see, the Bible says in Genesis 3:15 that crushing the head of the serpent would involve being struck on the heel, which is basically an ancient Jewish euphemism for dying a painful death. Because when a snake bites your heel, you die a painful death. So the seed of the woman, and by the way, the Jewish rabbis translated the word seed there as spermatos in Greek, which doesn't need any explanation. And you and I don't need to be a rocket scientist to know that woman and spermatos don't quite go together independently. So it seems to be alluding to a virgin birth, whereby the product of the virgin birth, Jesus, is actually going to be able to crush the head of the serpent, ultimate victory through a painful death. Now, if these are true, and together with many other prophecies like Psalms 16:10, it affirms that the Old Testament predicts a dying and rising Messiah. But that doesn't prove Jesus rose from the dead. Number 2, Jesus died by crucifixion. This is a fact that can be attested by not just New Testament scholars, New Testament material, but can be attested by the Roman historians themselves. Roman historians such as Tacitus, basically reliable, who was one of the arguably the greatest Roman historians of all time, who was also a Roman senator, Tacitus, about 50 years after the death of Christ, talks about how Yeshu suffered the extreme penalty, in other words, crucifixion. Tacitus is not alone. You have Pliny the Younger, Suetonius, and a list of other Roman historians that affirm the death of Christ. I just simply don't have time, but if Willie wants to press me on this, I certainly have their quotes to go by. Number two, you also have Jewish historians. The Jewish writings in the Babylonian Talmud, Sanhedrin 43a, affirm that the Jews were responsible for killing Jesus. This is not a biblical source. In fact, the Jews in the Babylonian Talmud are basically defending why they had to kill Jesus, because Jesus was this wicked person that was taking away the Jews from their true path, and the Jews were basically saying we have no choice but to kill him. But this proves that the Jews themselves affirm his death and thereby acknowledge responsibility for it. And you also have Syrian historians like Marabas, Serapion that allude to it, and Greek historians like Thales and so forth. So even atheists like Bart Ehrman would affirm without a shadow of doubt that Jesus did indeed die by crucifixion, and to deny, in fact, the evidence for Jesus' death is far superior to the death of Augustus or the death of Alexander the Great. Number three, Jesus was buried in Joseph's tomb. Now, the reason why historians would consider this remarkable is, number one, it was a known location, and Jerusalem, and number two, it was also a reputable person. You see, Joseph was a member of the Jewish Sanhedrin, which was the identical group that condemned Jesus to die. So why would the Christians say that the Jews, someone from the Sanhedrin, which were really their enemies, did something right by Jesus? It's almost as if hearing Najib praise Lim Kit Siang or Lim Guan Eng. He may criticize them and you may not take him seriously, but if Najib praises Lim Guan Eng, you have every reason to take him seriously, because why would he? So that is the idea that goes into this, that the Jews were praising a member of the Sanhedrin that were really hunting them down. So it seems to add historical credibility to this. And more than that, the empty tomb, the burial of Jesus in Joseph's tomb is considered to be remarkably strong, because there is no competing story or account as to where else Jesus was buried. This is the only theory. Number four, and really quickly, on the third day following his death, the women discovered the empty tomb. Now this is important because, number one, Jerusalem was the place where Christianity began. Had the tomb contained the body, there was no way Christianity could have flourished in Jerusalem historically. Number two, the women discovered the empty tomb was a remarkable statement, because the testimony of women back in the day would not be regarded in the Jewish court of law. It would be much easier for the apostles to say that Peter and James discovered the empty tomb. So that to say that the women did it seems to be only foolish unless they were trying to be faithful to the facts. Number three, it seems that the empty tomb was real, because even in Matthew's gospel, you find Matthew saying that the earliest conspiracy theories was that the disciples stole the body of Jesus. That were the earliest conspiracy theories going on. But you see, the earliest conspiracy theories affirmed the empty tomb, because why would they be saying the disciples stole the body if the body is still there? At this point, I'm not denying whether the apostles stole the body or not. All I'm simply saying is the conspiracy theory proves the empty tomb. Because why else would they claim the body was stolen if the body was still there? Finally, I go to my fifth and final point. The disciples believed in the resurrection. Now this is regarded as a fact simply for a number of reasons. Number one, the disciples were all willing martyrs. They were willing to die for the proclamations that they claimed. The disciples died brutal deaths. Peter was said by tradition to have been crucified upside down in Rome. Paul, because he was a Roman citizen, got it easy. He was beheaded according to tradition. But regardless of it, you see even in the biblical accounts, people died brutally. And the fact that Christianity was a persecuted religion in the Roman Empire testifies to this. Number two, failed expectations. Meaning, the Jews were not expecting a dying and rising Messiah. Had they been expecting this, you may have a case in hand. But the fact of the matter is the Jews were not expecting that. To the Jew, resurrection only happens on the last day. So why did Jesus rise somewhere in between? now, and the last day. That was the shocking element that would have challenged the typical Jewish mind. They were not expecting this to happen. Finally, before I end, the disciples claimed to be eyewitnesses of those things. Anyone can die for any claim. People die all the time for claims that they believe in. Some people blow themselves up. But the fact that they kill themselves mean that they believe something. It's very different if they were eyewitnesses. Because then they are dying not simply by following someone else, they are simply dying by what they claim to be true. Now, if you put these 5 facts together, it affirms the claim, in my mind, that Jesus did indeed rise from the dead. If there's any other better explanation, I would love to hear it from Willie. But again, I've presented 3 arguments in total. The cosmological argument, the moral argument, and the resurrection of Jesus. I think put together, it gives a good claim as to not only why God exists, but the Christian God exists. I'll leave it to Willie to tear them down. Thank you.
Okay, we gave about 30 seconds, 40 seconds, about almost a minute to him because of the slides. Now we would like to invite and put our hands together to welcome Willie to give his opening speech.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before I begin, I would like to thank the Methodist College Kuala Lumpur for hosting this debate and for inviting both Samuel and I for this most important of discussions. When I agreed to this, I assumed that I would just be helping Samuel train future pastors to be better at apologetics. But James later told me that MCKL is a normal college with non-Christian students. Now, I was a bit embarrassed by my misunderstanding, considering that I'm the product of 3 missionary schools. Of course, missionary colleges would exist too, considering how it would be a really happy coincidence if non-believers came to hear about Jesus died for their sins. They're never inviting me back, are they? To avoid being a hypocrite, I'm honestly not quite sure if education through evangelism is necessarily a bad thing, considering that my own education and English fluency is likely the result of it. But I guess my indoctrination didn't seem to take. But Samuel, you really have your work cut out for you today, considering that you're supposed to be the cavalry. So let's get to the matter at hand, the question of today's debate. Does God exist? I represent the atheist position, of course, that Samuel's God and any other gods do not exist. As per the format of the debate, I will deal with my own arguments first, and in this opening, and Samuel's later in the rebuttal. So in debates like this, I prefer to discuss how an average, reasonable person like myself becomes an atheist, rather than fire off a list of bullet points that you'll be able to get online anyways. But I'll try to link it to the common arguments where I can. So I'll just go through them really quickly. Number 1, the burden of proof or the definition of atheism. Number 2, the problem of inconsistent revelation. Number 3, the problem of incompetent creation. Number 4, that God is simply unnecessary. Right, so those of you... Sorry, can I have the clicker? Yep, so those of you who are familiar with debating will know that definitions and setup typically come before the point, so it seemed a little weird that my first point is actually about the burden of proof or definition. Right, so I do this for 2 reasons. One is that this remained the last remaining major thing which Samuel had problems with from our last debate, and it's very often a point of confusion. Second is because this argument is actually genuinely how I turn out to be an atheist. So what exactly is it that makes an atheist an atheist? A lot of people confuse I don't believe in God for I believe there is no God. Right? To make it a little bit more obvious, it's either that you believe that God definitely does not exist, or somebody who believes that there is no God will need to prove why he believes that. And if you can find an atheist who holds to that position, I would really like to meet him. Every atheist I know simply lacks a belief that there is a God, because there are no good reasons to believe in one, and that position has no burden of proof. So when Samuel set up the debate today, very William Lane Craig-like, where he says that there are 2 parts of this debate, right? One where there are good reasons to deny God, and the second part is that there are good reasons to affirm. The first part does not exist. I'm not going to be doing that today, and you're not going to be hearing any arguments in terms of that today. And this first point basically deals with why. Now, I know this looks like I'm trying to make this very easy for myself, but this is simply how logic works. Some people ask, then what differentiates you from an agnostic? Well, nothing. I'm an agnostic atheist. Agnosticism is a position of not knowing whether something is true or even knowable. So I was agnostic through most of my university life, and I didn't know the term when I was in university. I basically decided at that point that it was impossible to figure out which God is the right one, or even whether he wants anything from me. A long-lost, strong Christian friend of mine who turned into an atheist was the one who told me I was probably an atheist as well. And he showed me this through the Russell's teapot analogy. That analogy is a little bit British, so we'll do a slightly different one here. I'm going to tell you all right now that there is an invisible, huge elephant right in the middle of the room. The elephant has no weight, it makes no sound, you can't see it. It's invisible, but it's pink in color, but it's still invisible. It's completely undetectable to you, but it's real and it's right here, right now. I can't prove to you it exists, obviously, but can you prove to me that it does not? This requires a slight pause because many people haven't actually considered this question before. Most types of general negative questions cannot be proven, right? Proof that apples will never fall out, for example. Proof that the human race will never meet aliens. These are negative statements which are basically impossible to prove. That's what agnostic means. When you can't really prove or disprove something either way, you don't know for sure. Right? The saying absence of evidence is not evidence of absence is true, but it's not really helpful when it's impossible to have evidence either way. But then how do you respond to this claim about this invisible elephant? Willie, I acknowledge that I could not disprove your elephant, and therefore, despite the fact that your crazy invisible pink elephant is obviously made up, I must now hold an agnostic position towards it. I must not judge you when you whisper to it quietly for comfort and tell me that his name is Andy. And of course it's a he. And since we're being agnostic about Andy, I would like to tell you about Agnes, the invisible flying monkey, and the fairies in your garden, and so on and so forth. In case you have seen stories about the flying spaghetti monster, the invisible pink unicorn, they are all basically this argument. Right, so the average reasonable person would not be agnostic about Andy or Agnes until you offer them evidence or good reasons to believe they are going to withhold it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why agnosticism and atheism is virtually indistinguishable. It's just a question of labels. Some people do not actually want the label atheist. Now, if you were to ask me, wait, that means you're just not sure? Nope, I'm pretty sure that there's no good evidence right now, and there's no reason to care either way. A very kindly teacher I've met at Interfaith Talks once asked me at our second meeting, have you made any progress on your atheism? Even though that's entirely condescending, I'm still not entirely sure it would be polite to ask her whether she's made any progress herself. The thinking reveals the special position that God has come to take in our lives. He's been shoved in our face so much that we need invisible elephant analogies to realize that that is not how we treat everything else. We even need special terms like Andyism or agnosticism. Right? Anyone who tells you something extraordinary or even something perfectly ordinary would be required to carry the burden of proof for it. The same applies to God. None of you believe in Zeus, Amon-Ra, Demogorgon, Thor, the non-Avengers one. Nor can you prove that these entities do not exist. Yet every single one of you are atheists towards these gods. And that does not diminish your open-mindedness, nor does it make you unsure in any sense of the word. Moving on, what good reasons are there for an average reasonable person to reject the belief in God? My second argument deals with the primary reason I got disillusioned in my search for God in the first place, an argument I like to call the problem of inconsistent revelation. Although the topic today doesn't spell it out, but as Samuel mentioned, he needs to justify himself not just that a God exists, but that his specific God exists. There are thousands of religions and deities which he disbelieves just as much as I do, and in the last debate, Samuel mentioned that he studied comparative religion. Well, I try to point out that he did this as a Christian. If you're really seeking the truth, you need to have a zero default position and be ready to follow the evidence where it leads. I started as a Taoist, really confused about how it's often mixed up with Buddhism. I naively accepted Jesus through mail order evangelism, and later came to better understand it through the Catholic Church and a whole host of churches in between, depending on who was inviting. I attempted to heal the sick after attending a charismatic conference. My dad probably remembers that with some amusement. I spent 2 years with the Jehovah's Witnesses. Boo. I checked back with Buddhism in case I missed something. I tried to read some Hindu texts, and I read a translation of the Quran. Each time I was desperately trying to figure out what is true about the world that I live in, and if you apply the same fair skepticism to all of them, none of them actually stand out. Worse yet, not everybody have that opportunity. People in India consider themselves to be lucky to born Hindu because it's the correct religion. People in America lucky to be born into Christianity, and the people in the Middle East lucky to be Muslim, because your religion has to be the right one every time, right? In the same way that Samuel probably wishes I could be saved, I bemoan the fact that many of the religious may not be able to gain the perspective that allows them to honestly apply the skepticism they apply to other religions towards their own religion. Every religion has complicated explanations for its difficult questions, so long as you receive the guidance of the Holy Spirit or check in with some gurus first. As long as you're willing to engage in some mental gymnastics that rival Olympic gold medalists, it can all make sense. I've done exactly the same thing when I was a Christian as well. So how does an infinitely benevolent and powerful God create a world where confirming the mere fact of his existence or the nature of his identity be so convoluted? What is more likely, that God created us and yet failed to reveal himself to all those average reasonable persons of the world, many actively seeking him, or that in fact we created all these gods instead in our intellectual infancy? My third argument I like to call the problem of incompetent creation. The formulation of this argument is basically describing the world as we currently understand it, and after that exclaiming, and we honestly think that God did all this? Let me demonstrate really quickly. We now have reasonably good evidence that our universe started in a Big Bang, which created both space and time. The universe expanded and cooled over billions of years. Some dust got stuck together until they got too heavy. They caught fire. Stars started to form. The stars burned out and exploded, vomiting the periodic table of elements. Other stars ate this vomit. Some vomit ends up being caught by gravity and they swirl around, banging into each other. Earth formed by a couple of billion years of such banging, eventually cooled enough for liquid water. We do not yet know exactly how, but by reproducing early Earth-like conditions and studying how molecules naturally stick together in labs, we think complex molecules gain the ability to maintain cell membranes around themselves. These DNA-based life forms then, through the process of sex, murder, death, mutation, and natural selection, evolved to become better and better suited to survive in their environments. This eventually gave rise to sickly, fragile, but really smart creatures which developed tools and later science, allowing them to discern the laws of the universe, develop technology, and take over the world. All the while they hear instructions from the sky about the right and wrong kinds of sex, struggle to come up with reasons not to murder one another, and elect idiots into rather important positions of power. And we honestly think a God did all this? The past billion of years was for this recent few thousands of years. That 99% of species that ever lived are dead, but yet some species were worth saving in a giant boat. That billions and billions of stars and planets exist so that on this perfectly ordinary one, all important things happen. That some accountant is telling points for your every action to determine if you're going to the good place or the bad place. Though the painstaking efforts of generations of meticulous, self-questioning scientists who have managed to provide natural explanations for the origins of existence, the diversity of life and the laws that govern the physical world. Through all this, we have detected not the slightest sign of a creator, no impossible square stars, no zone of reverse gravity, no perpetual motion machine, and no indestructible tablet displaying cat memes that we only come to understand in the 21st century. Yeah, he's all-powerful, he has all the time, he can make as much Lego blocks as he likes. But the question is, which is more likely? That such a being exists, gives us the capacity to reason, and purposely makes it so we can't reason out his existence, or that he simply doesn't exist. My fourth and closing argument is that God is simply unnecessary. Now, this is somewhat related to my first one. Upon realizing that I was essentially an atheist, it took a bit of time to take God off the pedestal of unknowable where I thought he belonged. In that time, I realized that something that, which is at least true for me. God was an answer that I wanted, but not an answer that I needed. There's a famous anecdote attributed to Laplace, the French mathematician. When Napoleon asked him why, unlike Newton, there was no mention of God anywhere inside his work on astronomy, he replied, "I had no need of that hypothesis." Laplace solved the problem with the planetary orbits which Newton thought required God's intervention, otherwise all the planets will fly off into space. God is synonymous with "I don't know," and that has been the way for some time now. He is applied wherever we have a desire for answers but simply do not have one. When we were nomadic tribes, we asked, "What are the sun, the moon, and the stars?" We answered, "They are gods." But essentially, we didn't know. When earthquakes happened, we asked, "What is going on?" We answered, "God is angry." But essentially, we didn't know. Before the theory of evolution, we asked, "How did this variety of life come about?" We answered, "God made it so." But essentially, we didn't know. And today, we asked, "What triggered the Big Bang?" Many today say it must be God. But essentially, we could be in a hot bubble in an eternally inflating universe, multiverse, or we don't know yet. And that appears to be where we are today. God has been retreating to the next unknown when science explains the current one, and this has been happening for a long time now. This may of course be questions, there of course may be questions where science does not answer, but where it matters, science has so far not only delivered, but has been the only reliable means through which we can figure out how the world works. Is this an argument for the non-existence of God? I think so. And I think it will be more so in the coming years. An uncle of mine once told me that he's not too worried about my faith or lack of it, because one day I will encounter things I cannot explain and face hardships which demand an answer greater than what I can intellectually provide. And that will lead me back to God. Let's face it, we can debate philosophy all we want, but the common man or woman turns to God in the face of a world which is sometimes cruel and uncaring in order to be able to make sense of it all. So this multi-purpose answer, which answers absolutely nothing, probably powers more faith than anything else. I'm not too worried either. I'm entirely aware of the limits of science and logic. Once I understand that invoking God is essentially admitting ignorance, he ceases to be of any importance at all. And the question is, are you comfortable with your own ignorance? We are. You will hear many atheists say, until such time as I come upon sufficient evidence, I shall not believe, and I shall live my life on the assumption that he's not there. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my position. Thank you.
Thank you, Willie. Now we go to the second section, which is rebuttal from both sides to what has been said. The debaters will demonstrate flaws or weaknesses in the opposing positions. There will not be any new arguments. Each will be given 12 minutes. Let's put our hands together to welcome Samuel for his rebuttal.
All right. Thank you, Willie, for that enlightening opening statement. I just noticed it was very similar to the one, as you said, that we did 7 years ago. Now, Willie presented 4 basic arguments, and he admitted about my contention, number 1, that there are no good reasons to deny belief in God. Willie has kind of affirmed that by saying, well, he's not presenting any, but is simply lacking belief. So basically, and he's saying that the agnosticism he holds to is the same as atheism. I'm afraid that's not what the dictionaries actually say. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy defines atheism as basically the belief that God does not exist. And the reason why it is the assertion that God does not exist is because only then can atheism either be proven true or false. Imagine if the belief of, if atheism or agnosticism were the same thing and simply meant lacking belief, then I'm afraid that Fluffy the cat would be an atheist or agnostic too, because I can assure you Fluffy the cat lacks belief. And so does every ant and lizard and cockroach in my house. So I think that in order to actually present it, the definitional argument I don't think would work at an intellectual level. We have to stick with the dictionary definitions, but I respect the fact that Willie has already told me this before, so I'll just let that slide. But number 2, the burden of proof. If you honestly are not certain, if you're honestly not certain whether God exists or not, it seems to me the more rational position to take would be classical agnosticism, which is basically, I don't know. Now you see, I'm not aware as to whether aliens exist or not. I don't know. I honestly haven't seen any good evidence. But you know, I'm not convinced that aliens do not exist. I'm simply open to evidence. And likewise, you may have faced questions in your life that you basically had no answers to. And I would love to tell you that turning to atheism is not what you should do, but rather seek answers. And until you can prove the assertions that you say, only then go further. But with that said, that will be me just dealing with the definitional argument. I thought it was very interesting that even the atheist philosopher Thomas Nagel, in his book The Last Word, says that atheism, in fact, is in a sense a faith, a hoping that God does not exist. This is what Thomas Nagel, the atheist philosopher, says. He says, I want atheism to be true, and I'm made uneasy by the fact that some of the most intelligent and well-informed people I know are religious believers. It isn't just that I don't believe in God and naturally hope that I'm right in my belief. It is that I hope there is no God. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want a universe to be like that. Now, I'm not saying this is Willie's belief, but that certainly seems to me to be the attitude that most atheists carry forward, and I don't think that's helpful in the pursuit of knowledge, particularly as Willie himself is someone that is into education. Next, Willie also says that, I want to tackle the question that he says that this is a very common internet cliche, that we are all atheists to most gods except with respect to one more God. This is not an intellectual argument against atheism, against Christianity or theism, simply because it misunderstands the definition of atheism. We are not atheistic to most gods. In fact, everyone who believes in a God is not an atheist. Remember, the Stanford Encyclopedia says that the definition of the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy says the definition of atheism is the metaphysical claim that there is no God. So, what do you say then to someone who says we are all atheists to most gods? Well, I'm not atheist to Ra or to Thanos or to Thor or whatever gods that are out there. I simply believe that the evidence for the resurrection trumps the belief to that God. If Jesus did indeed raise from the dead, then of course there is no truth in those ancient fabrications. I'm making a positive claim in light of what we do know. And to simply say, in my humble opinion, to simply say we are atheists to most gods and then atheists are atheists to just one more God would be akin to saying we are all bachelors to many women, and the ones that are married are just bachelor to one less woman. That doesn't make sense. It confuses the definition of what it means to be a bachelor. So I think this is simply a definitional argument that goes on the internet. Willie says, what makes God so unknowable? It just seems that there are inconsistency in revelation all throughout. Now that is true. Now the inconsistencies, let me say, actually affirm my case, not Willie's case. Because all the inconsistencies of the revelation affirm belief in the existence of God. Regardless of whether you go to the Mayan tribes, or the ancient Mayans, or the Incans, or you go to the Amazonian tribes, even where man has not tread foot, you find evidence of religion. This is what was actually stated by the developmental psychologist, who is an atheist herself, Deborah Kellerman from Boston University, in her famous paper, Are Children Intuitive Theists? And in that paper, and by the way, she is acclaimed by even Richard Dawkins himself because he finds her work really attractive. She has affirmed that children are born with dispositions towards religious belief, but that we somehow suppress this belief in order to, for whatever reason, because we don't need them anymore, which points to basically Willie's fourth claim that God is irrelevant. But you see, that is a consistent revelation, whether you're a child or whether you are in different parts of the world. The revelation that God exists is unanimous. Atheism, I would agree, takes a little bit more intellectual effort in the sense of suppressing, that is. So I don't think that the inconsistent revelation really affects. In fact, I think it affirms my position. Number 3, incompetent creation. Willie points out about the creation being not very competent. And basically, in the last debate, he pointed out as well that there's imperfection in creation. First of all, that's, I don't think, entirely true. I think when you use the word perfection, you must compare perfection to the intentionality and to the purpose of a maker. Remember the knife analogy I gave here? To give you an example, supposing, a ripped gene. Okay, someone from the older generation may look at a ripped gene and say, that's an imperfect gene. But you and I know, if the designer was a hipster, that's not imperfect. Because if the designer was a hipster, he's intending to come up with a ripped gene to express his hipsterness, whatever that may be. So, if it all depends on what was the intention, and once you understand the intentionality and the purpose of the creator, only then can you judge and say whether or not he has achieved or failed miserably to execute his intentions. But you see, Willie does not even allow that possibility because the starting default statement is God does not exist. And once you shut that down, you basically cannot go anywhere else. You can't even begin to discuss. You can't even get into the conversation as to whether creation is perfect or not. I submit to you that the question of whether creation is perfect or not is a conversation among believers in God. And if you don't believe in God, you can't even get into that because you have no basis to judge whether the intentionality and the purpose was met or not. Finally, Willie does say that belief in God is unnecessary. But so is the Samsung tablet, and I'll show you it does exist. It doesn't have anything to do with its existence. To say something is not necessary is not to deny its existence. In fact, if God doesn't exist, as I presented in my opening argument, we wouldn't be actually alive to actually say he was unnecessary. So that actually goes back to my cosmological argument. If God doesn't exist, the universe doesn't exist. And if the universe doesn't exist, the very breath to say God is unnecessary would not be possible. So in order for us to actually actualize that statement, you will need to posit a God. And that's what my first argument seek to do. Now, in my closing minutes, what I really want to do is to deal with one last argument I think that I may have slipped out. Oh yes, that religion was retreating in the face of science for centuries. This is not the case. I think Isaac Newton may disagree. This is what Isaac Newton says. Gravity explains the motions of the planet, but it cannot explain who sets the planets in motion. Science deals with the laws of nature. Science deals with what the natural laws are. But it is the religion that deals with what causes these things. And whether you say that there is a cause and that cause is a transcendent creator, i.e. God, or whether you, like Willie, say that there is no cause, please bear in mind that is a religious statement. Science has nothing to do with the supernatural. Science simply observes the natural world. So I don't think it's fair to say that that Christianity or religion were retreating in the face of science. Rather, I think it is fair that some Christians retreat in the face of science, and that is not good. I would be side by side with Willie in affirming the fact that those statements are wrong. Christians have nothing to be afraid of science. Science is no boogeyman that that can threaten a Christian. In fact, close friends I have, in fact, one of them right here is an astrophysicist herself. So we pursue science. I'm all for science. But what I'm saying is this: please realize the distinction that when science starts going speculative as to whether a creator exists, it is no longer dealing with the observable natural world which is repeatable. It is now venturing into the supernatural, and that is the realm of religion, which is where the discussion, does God exist, comes in. So in conclusion, I've presented three arguments: the cosmological argument, the resurrection of Jesus, the moral argument, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I don't think Willie touched on them yet. Willie will have his opportunity to tackle them in the rebuttal period. But for the four arguments that Willie presented, the definitional one, the burden of proof, I've dismissed it simply by saying that if you truly don't know, you have to be open to the evidence. We're not seeing that from most atheists today. And number two, the problem of inconsistent revelation affirms the Christian position because they all agree that God exists. Number three, incompetent creation is a conversation the atheist cannot even get into, simply because you have to affirm the creator and basically to begin to affirm his intentionality in order to judge whether he's achieved that or not. And finally, to say that God is irrelevant simply doesn't answer the question of whether God exists. You may use that and say that's an argument, but I'll submit to you that's a very weak argument. If my cosmological argument holds true, we wouldn't be alive to be able to make that statement against God. Thank you.
Okay, now Willie is going to give his rebuttal against Samuel's opening speech, and he's given 12 minutes. Let's put our hands together to welcome him.
Thank you, Joshua. So first of all, before I get into rebuttals of Samuel points, we need to get back to the burden of proof, I think. Because if we do not settle that, this debate will not make any sense whatsoever. So at this point, I'm going to have to accuse you of intellectual dishonesty here, Samuel. You know who I am, and you're essentially saying that I do not know the correct term for my own belief system. So yeah, we can go into it. You can quote the Oxford Dictionary. I can go to Wikipedia and say, look, there are weak atheism, there's positive atheism, negative atheism, strong atheism. There are all kinds of terms. You chose to debate me, and therefore I think you should debate me on my terms. And it is very nice for apologetics, people into apologetics, to actually look for the bogeyman atheist who denies the existence of God, and bring it up in every debate. That's a very common thing which Samuel Lane Craig, did I get his name right? William Lane Craig does in every single one of the debates. But that is the very definition of intellectual dishonesty. Now, if this is the first time we're meeting in a debate, that's fine, right? He doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know maybe what type of atheist. Maybe he's not very familiar. But this is the fourth time we're debating. You know what my position is. You know that I do not deny the existence of God actively. You know that I simply lack a belief in God. And if you want good conversations with the atheist community in Malaysia or anywhere else in the world, this is who you need to debate. And I think it makes, if we're having this conversation for the benefit of just this crowd, that's fine, right? We can re-explain all these kind of things, but it remains the fact that probably only the insane or I would, like the last debate you asked me whether I thought you were delusional. I think they're more delusional than you, right? Any atheist would possibly assert that he knows for sure that God actually does not exist. So we need to get that very, very clear, right? The burden of proof is a major question. We can discuss everything else. We can discuss likelihood. We can discuss what fits the pattern better, like what we're trying to do in the rest of the rebuttals. But that question, if you want to have a good and positive conversation with an atheist, if you want to understand why people are losing belief and they are fine with it, you're going to have to deal with the fact that the burden of proof is basically in your hands, especially if you're in apologetics. That is simply how the reality works. And I purposely spent more than half my speech dealing with that exact matter, hoping to put it to rest, considering that there may be people who are not aware of it. So I think we need to really, really get that clear. Now, we need to deal, so I'm here to actually deal with the rest of Samuel's points with regards to the cosmological argument, the moral argument, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, these are very common philosophical arguments. I would say that overall as a case, I really, really much, I know you keep saying that you thought in the very first debate you actually lost, but the reason why we get into debates like this is to actually understand each other and see each other's positions better. I love your original case more because I believe that is how you came to be a Christian. I felt very strongly that it's a good debate because we were comparing notes, if you like. Right? Some people in the audience, like my annoying atheist friends, might be taking notes like, okay, who's winning points here and whatnot. But I think that it actually makes a lot of sense that people talk about how they actually came to believe. And let's face it, people don't become Christian or Hindu or Muslim because they were born and then their parents sat them down and showed them a video of the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, the moral argument, and the question of objective morality and all these kind of things. It just doesn't happen that way. You might ask, or you might come across that question halfway through your life and it goes like, that makes sense, that doesn't make sense, I'm too lazy to think about it. Right? But that's not the natural way which people come into belief or disbelief. But that's why I say overall as a case, this is a very common apologetics case, but it's not going to work with atheists, and I don't think it works very well. Philosophy is beautiful. Philosophy is useful, right? It helps us. I like to say that it helps us ask the correct questions. It helps us weigh things which, exactly as you said, science does not actually answer, right? Science provides reasonable answers for reality, but it doesn't help you ask questions better, right? Philosophy does that. But philosophy doesn't actually provide you with answers, right? Because it makes nonsensical arguments which is almost too easy to defeat. Let's take the cosmological argument, for example. Everything that exists has a cause. Looks like it's true. Universe started to exist. We didn't know this at first. Ironically, science actually told us this, and ever since the Big Bang, all the apologetics people have been getting about, look, the Big Bang, it started. After that, you have the universe must have a cause, is a conclusion. Now, we call this deductive reasoning. I bored my student to death last semester because I teach a subject called critical thinking, and William Lane Craig actually loved reminding everybody that if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true, because that is deductive reasoning form. In apologetics, this is one of the first things that you will learn. But you need to notice that it's a philosophical argument. Everything that exists must have a cause. Therefore, the universe must start existing. Therefore, there must be something that didn't yet exist which must have caused everything to exist. Do you see the problem with that? Because everything that exists must have a cause. God exists, he must have had a cause. It's in your premises, right? It's right there. So if you're going to say that, okay, let's create a special condition where there is one thing which must have existed before everything else that caused it, why not just have everything having existed before? Why must you have A that caused B? If A is going to be special, why can't you just make B exist forever and let B be the one that's special? Because you can go on forever, right? Z may have caused A. Y may have caused Z. You see, it's meaningless. These are beautiful arguments. They are And the reason why the reason why we don't have an easy way to figure out who is right or who is wrong yet is because none of these arguments are useful. They are philosophical, they look very logical, they are beautiful when you say it, and depending on who describes it to you. But just as Samuel has successfully described it very beautifully to you, I have hopefully successfully described it very horribly to you. And that is the essence. It makes us ask very good questions. It helps us, it probably drove the research into the Big Bang in the first place, for example. And these days, people don't talk about the Big Bang. I alluded to it a little bit in my speech. These days, due to the nature with which the Big Bang happened, there's a new idea called the inflationary theory. Apologetics needs to get on top of this, right? There's about 3 different theories of theoretical physics which suggest that there's actually a multiverse. And typically, when multiple theories independently suggest the existence of something, the scientific community call it a new paradigm, right? So the Big Bang is a slightly old paradigm now. Is confirmed by observational science, but the mathematics that results from it suggests to a multiverse. So now you can't say the universe has a beginning anymore because apparently the multiverse has a beginning. So you need to update that cosmological argument. It should probably go, everything that exists have a cause, the multiverse started existing. Is this so? Not very convincing for me. The second argument, the moral argument, we did this over and over in the last debate. Okay, so I'm going to say that Andy told me to do everything that I'm doing today. Now I have objective moral values. Andy told me. You remember the invisible pink elephant? Objectivity simply means, we can go to the English language dictionary for this. Objectivity simply means that outside of yourself, right? So Andy is outside space and time. You can't detect him. He's extra-dimensional, just as all the other gods. And he told me the right thing to do every single time. So now I also have objective moral values. So the real argument from objective moral values doesn't actually work this way, obviously. Apologetics like to point out that atheists have moral relativism. Yes, we have moral relativism. If you Google this, if you immediately click on a Christian Apologetics, I actually looked this up before I came in because I wanted to be sure with the words that I use. There is horrible definitions. There are definitions that go, if you think something is true and you decide to do those things based on it, therefore therefore you cannot judge anybody else's actions, right? So because anything anybody says must be true. But there's also moral relativism, which is based on the majority, right? I happen to think that that is a reasonably good way. Luckily, in recent years, the majority have come to realize that there is such a thing as the tyranny of the majority. It doesn't really work. Philosophy, again, like I said, a useful thing which discusses this, has told us that it doesn't actually work that way. You see in New Zealand, a majority non-Muslim country actually came together to support the minority Muslim group. You will see that people are beginning to understand that you cannot isolate yourself and live very, very happy lives if people outside of your circle are suffering. Right? Europe has been a very successful place. There's a huge debate about immigration there right now. And basically, if you ignore and you do not help your fellow men, when huge crises happen, your borders get flooded with immigrants. Right? And this is an entirely huge debate which is going on right now. I happen to think that our existing discussion on morality is actually pretty good to show us how things are moving. But that's slightly besides the point. The question is, does objective morality actually prove the existence of God or help you be convinced? Or does it actually say, wait, I want objective morality because I don't want to do this difficult task of figuring out for myself what is right or wrong? Right? And that is not a proof for the existence of God. That is telling yourself, just like I mentioned in my 4th point, that you actually want a God. Right? You feel that it is necessary because you feel that it is a hopeless exercise to try and figure out for yourself what is right or wrong. So I don't think that the moral argument is essentially a good argument for the existence of God. You picked an unfortunate example, the upside down in space example. No astronauts will ever ask each other whether they're up or down in space. They will discuss which direction to move, which is irrelevant. You don't need to figure out what is up or down. You need to figure out which direction to point the rocket and which planet you want to fly to. And I think that is actually a pretty good analogy for how morality works. The concept of good or evil, this black and white thing, is very much a concept from religion. right? These days we talk about what is the right thing to do based on a lot of factors, and we try to weigh those things in order to figure things out. For the resurrection of Jesus Christ, I think I've dealt with that with my point about inconsistent revelation. The essential point is this: your religion will have miracles. You will have looked at the attestments to those miracles. You will find scribes written by Tacitus and etc. Look it up. Like Samuel said, he didn't have time to get into it, but read them. I have, right? And at the end of the day, all the miracles that your religion has, have you applied that same level of the skepticism that you apply to other religions' miracles, which you then apply to your own? Because if you're able to say that other religions are not real because their miracles are invalid, what about your own? Right? Thank you.
Now we get to the third part. Thank you for both speakers for giving their opening speeches and their rebuttals to their respective speeches. Now we have two sections, the third and the fourth part. Now the third part is what we call the cross-examination. And in this part, one side is given 8 minutes to cross-examine the other side, and the other side is required to give short, succinct answers. The other side is supposed to answer all questions as best as they can. They should not try to dodge the question like, I don't know, or, you know, I don't have any stand on this issue, and so on. They are supposed to give either yes or no questions or give reasons for some of these. Then after one side has cross-examined the other side, then the roles will be reversed. And this will go on for 8 minutes each. After this, you get to the fourth and the second last part of the debate, which is the response. And each side is given 5 minutes to respond to the cross-examination that has just taken place in the context of the whole debate.
And the rest of the case, we actually didn't defend our own cases.
Yeah, but then the debaters will also be given a chance to address the issues from the rebuttal in their closing statements, which are also 5 minutes long. Now, if you do have a bit of time after, you know, in your response, after explaining or talking a little bit about the cross-examination that just has happened, you may use that. Okay, so with that, shall we begin with Samuel cross-examining Willie, and then followed by Willie cross-examining Samuel? Right. This will go on for 8 minutes each. All right. You may begin.
All right, I'm sorry, Willie, if you felt that I was actually pinning that to you, but I actually recall saying that I didn't pin that to you and I let it slide, but rather I felt that that was not helpful for coming to truth. So again, I don't think I'm guilty of intellectual dishonesty because I didn't pin you to it. And I in fact admitted that we had discussed this prior to that. So let me get on to my first question. What would convince you that God exists?
Okay, so how convenient. There's actually a couple of physicists who was looking into this question. Actually, one very good way would be to drop Wikipedia, you know, like thousands of years ago. Even Wikipedia would be reasonably good, you know, or a tablet which contains a whole bunch of mathematical things. Like I said, if you have an indestructible object which spits cat memes, just cat memes, right, that we don't actually understand until the 21st century, that will be enough. There are theories which goes into like, you know, it's possible that, you know, there's a paradoxical world where any kind of evidence you throw and stuff like that is not good enough. It's not that difficult. Create a natural world, right, which you can apply science to, and then make one thing which is unnatural, which cannot possibly be explained. Now, it will not necessarily, it's not proof. Again, it doesn't, you know, like, oh, God, right, unless maybe the thing will keep shooting a name or something like that. But it is possible to do such a thing, even within the minds of someone like me. Unless we're saying that God can't do it, then omnipotence, problem.
Right, I'm just wondering again, how would you be convinced that such a thing is true? Because you mentioned that, say that, you know, drop a book or Wikipedia. God didn't just, it seems to me, according to the Christian worldview, that God didn't just drop a book, he dropped the word, his very son himself, and we have historical evidence to back that up. What's to say you wouldn't explain away every possible explanations to it? I mean, how would you know, is basically my question.
Well, if it's an indestructible tablet, I wouldn't have to look up what Tacitus said in a random letter to somebody in the past. It would still be there. it will still be blinking, you know, various facts. We can still connect a LAN cable to it. It could transform into the whatever fiber optics. It would just, you know, there are things which you can do which any conceivable mind would be able to think about it. Today, we have information technology. Information technology is virtually indestructible. When all of you die, you will leave behind horrible Facebook photos. Think about that. God surely would be able to do something better, right? Rather than leaving very anecdotal evidence which relies on testimony after unreliable testimony after unreliable testimony.
Well, I'm just wondering, so to say whether I got you right, you're basically saying he would leave material that would be available till this day. That's what you're saying.
Like I said, it doesn't matter. It just has to be like, if the general average man doesn't understand it, all he has to do is to leave an object that defies physical explanation. Most scientists would still say, right, we just haven't explained it yet, right? But at least when you make it extremely obvious that there is no possible way to explain it. For example, chemistry, there's no element which sits out from everything else. Everything can be explained by protons and neutrons. Do something in terms of that. Create an object that defies the law of gravity, right? I actually gave 4 conditions, right, in my speech. If you have a reasonable, sufficient understanding of science, you are able to independently verify through mathematics as well as through scientific inquiry that certain things are possibly unnatural. We thought the diversity of life was unnatural for a lot of times. A lot of scientists thought that, you know, the diversity of life is the final bastion for religion. And they rightfully thought so. If I had been alive during that time, I would probably have thought that religion was true as well, that God is probably real. So that's why that last 4th point, it's not a neat philosophical argument, but this is what is true in the world. This is the reason why you're facing more and more the growth of atheism throughout the world. As people get more educated, as we gain a better understanding, as we see that there is actually a way to explain and understand things, we're beginning to see that, you know, we don't actually need a God explanation.
Okay, I'll just drop it as there because it's my view again that you would explain away. Your ability is basically to explain away everything, but I'll just leave that as there. Let's get to my first argument, the cosmological argument. It seems to me that your only response to the cosmological argument is that everything must exist. I'm just wondering if you heard my opening premise that I said everything that my premise 1 is that everything that begins to exist must have a cause. Not that everything that exists must have a cause. I'm just wondering, did you mishear that, or was that a misunderstanding?
Okay, so which truth in the world tells us that God did not begin to exist?
Again, you can ask me that in your Christian time. Okay, I'll be happy to deal with that.
Right, but this is essentially the answer to your question. It's a false premise, right? Everything that begins to exist, when you reach your conclusion, you ignore the fact that you have actually given God special pleading in that particular philosophical argument. You can look it up. I mean, if you study that particular philosophical argument, there are a lot of common arguments against it. That's one of the most common ones.
Let's just
comes
go
with an assumption.
Let's just run with that. Okay, let's run with that. Let's say there's an infinite series of causes. Do you think that would actually lead you anywhere? Say an infinite series of causes going back to infinity past?
No, it doesn't lead me anywhere. But it doesn't also necessitates that it was actually started by something, because the thing that has started it would require the special condition that it wasn't started, which you can then apply to the infinite regress.
Again, I'm just wondering whether you're misunderstanding what I'm saying, because what I'm saying is everything that begins to exist, and if God by definition is uncaused, don't you think it's a terminological confusion to say what caused the uncaused?
Right. So here I'm going to say the uncaused universe exists. Okay. By definition, right? So the way you introduce uncaused to God is by defining it. By definition, God was uncaused. Therefore, God must have caused the universe. Okay. So I'm doing the same thing. By definition, the universe is uncaused. Therefore, the universe exists.
But again, I'm just wondering whether you realize that the universe is a natural entity. That, for example, energy is running down, second law of thermodynamics, and that you cannot have a past series of infinite events. I'm just wondering how we reckon. We have good reason to believe that the universe is not infinite in the past, and that's something we do know. So I'm just wondering how, in the face of such overwhelming evidence, that you still hold on to that.
So the second law of thermodynamics, actually that problem has been solved. If you look at, but again this is technical, if you look at inflationary theory, it actually shows that there are pockets of entropy which actually can increase. Sorry, there's actually pockets of entropy that can decrease due to the fact that the universe is expanding, right? So, but that scientific theory has actually been resolved.
All right, I just
so.
Okay, so.
But to answer that question, the universe is a natural entity, right? Which currently we think is real because we can detect through physical means and so on. The multiverse, so far, haven't been detected. By scientific standards, it's terrible, because it's extra dimensional, it's outside our space and time. But that actually is the new thing, right? Which is
and it
beyond
doesn't
space and
seem
time.
to you that you've just pushed it back one step further, the same question.
Because it's going to keep happening. Science is going to keep doing this. Like I said, I didn't say science has answered the question, right? After you get the multiverse, you're going to get another question: what created the multiverse? That's fine.
And
I'm fine with that.
And
Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether doesn't it reach the point that you have an uncaused start to all of this? But time's up. Right? Thank you. Thanks, Willie.
Okay, thank you, Samuel, for your cross-examination. Now the tables are turned, and Willie gets 8 minutes to cross-examine Samuel.
This should be fun. Right.
What? Why can there only be one? By the way,
One what?
why can there only be one? By definition, let's do the cosmological argument. Do it that way. By definition, a group of gods exists and they cause the universe. In Hinduism is true. Why not?
Hinduism actually, arguably held by many philosophers, is actually the belief in one God, one supreme being, Brahman, and that everything else is just a playing out of him.
Right. Okay. Let's change it to Greek then. You get the point of the question.
No, I do. But the thing is, I don't think it's the point of the cosmological argument to point to the existence of a monotheistic God. The point of the cosmological argument, in essence, is to argue that there is a transcendent. I listed the criteria there.
I understand.
I'll finish the point. The point of the cosmological argument is to argue for a timeless, spaceless, immaterial, non-physical, and personal being. And it seems to be it would be a weird form of atheism that acknowledges that such a being exists, but I would say don't call it God. You know.
Yeah, but why not gods? That's my question. Why not more than one? Why not two beings? Because a lot of Dungeons and Dragons does that, two beings, one of light and one of darkness, come into being, and they fight and they create all the children gods, and then after that they decided to run to the planet Earth and blah blah blah. Why not two?
For the first part, I think watching cartoons and movies like that is not the best place to go to define that. But let's deal with that. Let's run with it. The point of whether there is one God or not, or which God exists, was not the intent. It was not my intention to use the cosmological argument to explain that, but rather it was the resurrection. So for me, if the resurrection holds true, then it holds firm to the idea that the God we are talking about, which exists, is the God of the Bible, and that we should take His word seriously.
Okay.
So I just feel you're looking at the wrong argument here.
Would you agree that the cosmological argument can be used to justify the existence of two gods in the beginning?
I mean, that would be disputed. I think Craig might dispute that, but the fact is, for me, that was not my intention. It could, yeah, why not?
I agree it's not your intention. Could it have been used to do that?
I mean, it could. I think it would be, again, it would be better. For example, it would be a superior explanation to the fact that there is no God. It would simply affirm that the transcendent beings, therefore, are plural. But again, it's not the point of the cosmological argument to affirm that. It's the resurrection that determines it's one God.
Okay, what is your obsession with objective morality? Like, the first question, what is your obsession with objective morality? Why must morality be objective for you? I understand the the objective part, but why do you want objective morality?
No, again, I think that, for example, again, I don't think I'm obsessed with it. I just think it's real. That was the point of premise 2 of that argument. But to answer your question, I think that, for example, even you believe that in not just moral change, but moral improvement. So, for example, you believe that certain people in your last debate, you said, were idiots in the past for what they did. Now, the fact that you're saying morality changed today, say the last few hundred years we endorsed slavery, not we, but they endorsed. Okay. A lot of Americans watching us here. Sorry, guys.
I'm not Hitchens,
but the thing is, I mean, for example, slavery, the view that slavery was acceptable was a view held many years ago. But again, you believe that morality has improved, which for me is an assertion of objective moral values. Because if it wasn't objective, it would merely be a change in morality and not an improvement. Because what are you improving towards? You seem to be headed towards an objective point. And I feel that you're basically dismissing of objective morality simply demonstrates the inconsistency of your view of morality.
That wasn't my question, was it?
No, your question is my obsession.
No, why do you want, yeah. Okay,
Your question was my obsession. Yeah.
right. So how do you compare your objective morality with another religion's objective morality? Because their morality is objective as well.
Well, objective morality, and now this is a loaded question, it's a good question. The idea that morality is objective is in the sense that there are objective right and wrongs. Now, I think C.S. Lewis did well to argue this, and he says that in a general sense, every religion agrees on the basic premises of objective morality. We all agree that killing is wrong. We all agree that adultery is wrong. We just define it a little differently. So, for example, one religion may say a certain kind of killing would not constitute murder, it would be just war. But they all agree that killing is wrong. They just define that action, that specific action, differently. And similarly, some may say that the state handing out capital punishment, that's a debate that's going on in Parliament, is wrong. But again, that's a discussion of what constitutes murder, then rather instead of whether murder is wrong. So I'm saying that different religions agree on the fundamentals of objective moral values. In fact, I would submit that it's written in our hearts. We know it. And that's why people who committed the atrocities in history can be held accountable to it. So, but again, different religions would disagree, but we agree on the fundamentals.
So you're saying that what you feel in your heart is right or wrong is your evidence of objective morality, and therefore that helps you confirm that God exists.
No, that's a mischaracterization of what I just said. What I'm saying is that if God exists, objective moral values and duties do, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But your question earlier dealt with, for example, what's the difference between my objective moral values and others? To which I'm saying, in a general sense, there is no difference. We all affirm these things. So, for example, if you go to a tribe of cannibals, I would say that they have an understanding of our objective moral values. It's the same principle, but for example, they may just consider killing us, say that the missionary that went to the Andaman Islands, as just war to protect themselves. So you see, they agree that killing is wrong because they wouldn't kill themselves. But the thing is, among themselves, or maybe if they do, they would legitimize it some other way. But the point is, they consider something just war, and that's why they legitimize it. But the fact that killing is wrong goes across the board, regardless of what ethnicity you come from.
I think picking cannibals was a really bad example of not killing each other on an island. Sorry. Okay, the miracles, right? Resurrection of Jesus Christ and so on. How many miracles from other religions have you honestly gone through? I can't ask you about some specific religions, but you know, like that you have actually considered very carefully and dismissed as untrue.
No, I've not really looked at a lot of them, to be honest with you. No, so that's a statement of honesty. I've not looked at a lot of them, but what I think is that if for example, I don't think you would need to go through this process of elimination where you eliminate every single claim there is from Greek civilization all the way to our present day. Instead, in fact, if the resurrection theory holds true, it would be sufficient to say on that basis that all those other claims are wrong. So the question is really, is it true? And I think that's why you can deal with that instead of having to that tedious process of dismissing every claims to miracles across different religions. Because frankly, I'm open to claims of miracles from other religions. I am open to them. I don't dismiss them.
Yeah, but if other people have come back to life and they claim a religion, you don't care about those because that's the basis of yours.
No, what I'm saying is that I don't believe they come back to life, but I'm saying that other miracles are possible because I believe in the spirit world. I believe that, for example, different religions have the ability to perform miracles. Simply because of the existence of the spiritual realm. So that is not something that would contradict my position at all. But rather what I'm saying is the power to bring back from the dead, if that is true, affirms the existence of a Christian God.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you for keeping time, the both of you. And now we will go to the fourth and second last section, which is to both are given 5 minutes to respond to the cross-examination and to maybe even respond to the earlier rebuttals of the opening speeches. So each is given 5 minutes. We'll start with Samuel first.
All right. Thank you, Willie, for that cross-examination. I really enjoy the cross-examinations by Willie, but I can tell you that I didn't enjoy it the first time. He is good, isn't he? In my response period, I just want to look at a couple of arguments that I raised, the positive arguments from the opening statement. I brought up the cosmological argument. Here it seems to me that all Willie says is it doesn't work very well. In fact, I think I heard him for at least a good 5 to 6 minutes on the cosmological argument, in which he really presented no serious objection to the cosmological argument, apart from the fact that it is not useful. I believe that's what he said, and it doesn't work very well. It's a philosophical argument. Science told us that the universe began to exist. It is deductive reasoning, in fact, what I felt that happened is that he said that he seems to have misunderstood me. I'll leave it to him to see whether that's the case or not, but it seemed to me that he misunderstood that I said that everything begins to exist. That was not my claim. My claim rather was everything that begins to exist must have a cause. Now, why is that important? Because God, by definition, is uncaused. And in the cross-examination, what I really tried to get Willie to do is to help see that, to basically expose the fact that if you don't have a starting point, if you don't have an uncaused start, what you end up doing is having an infinite regress that goes nowhere. So everything can be caused, and where do you stop this? It really goes nowhere. And that's why I feel you need to have an uncaused beginning. But again, to ask who caused the uncaused is simply a definitional confusion. So I don't think that was a very good argument, and I'll still say that the cosmological argument, premise 2, the universe begins to exist, is true. Now, Willie did mention inflationary models of, for example, the multiverse and so forth, but if I recall correctly, in 2003, a group of scientists, I'm not very familiar with this work, I'm just citing this work. I'm not very familiar with them, but in 2003, there were 3 cosmologists, Arvind Bode, it's called the Bode-Good and Vilenkin theorem, that seems to have proven that, or basically asserted or demonstrated that even multiverses would still need to have a finite starting point somewhere in history. It doesn't go on forever. So I think that argument has been updated, really. And the point is that even if you say that they are multiverse, which I tried to point out with my final question, you just push the question one step further. What caused the multiverse? Because remember, as long as you're dealing with the natural world, you are constantly having to remember that natural causes need to happen for natural effects. So simply saying the multiverse is not going to be the answer to it. But notice the difference between our presentations. I was determined to present to you what we do know. But it seemed to me that the multiverse hypothesis and all that were a little bit more speculations than based on the evidences. Let's go to the moral argument. The moral argument I presented, number 1, that if God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. And here it seems to me that Willie was just saying that we all don't need objective moral values. What's your obsession with objective moral values? But again, if you are going to criticize or condemn any moral action, whether it's in the past or present, you are basically implying a moral improvement, that we are somehow morally superior than those we were criticizing. What standard are you using? What are the grounds on which you are standing from which you can say the other person is not living up to that mark? Again, in Willie's worldview, I have a lot of respect for him, but I don't think he has any grounds on which to criticize any civilization on that subjective moral values. He is right, for example, if he were to point out that some parts of religion are evil, he is right to do that. I'm not saying he's wrong to make that assertion, but I'm saying on his worldview, there are no grounds to do that. Unless you believe in a God and we are basically made in his image, there really is no serious allegations to basically say that anything is right or wrong for that matter. Finally, the resurrection of Jesus Christ here, it seems to me that there was no objections at all. In fact, he says that his argument of inconsistent revelations dealt with it and simply asked the question if I've applied the same standard to other religions, to which I will respond here, even if I do apply the same standards to the other religions or not, it doesn't matter. If the resurrection hypothesis is true, it follows that the Christian God exists. I've presented 3 arguments, and I'm happy to say so far the arguments are still intact. Thank you.
Okay, I'll now let Willie respond to the cross-examination and any other issues that have arisen.
Thank you. So let's first deal with my defenses for my own cases before we go back to what Sam just did, because after this I'm immediately doing my closing. Now for the question of incompetent creation, Samuel mentioned that creation is actually in fact perfect, right? This is basically what I like call the mysterious God, you can't possibly understand his mind kind of argument, right? Which is fine. Right, like I said, in every religion, difficult questions, there are always ways to answer it. When I was a Christian, I bent over backwards a lot, justifying to myself, why is there evil in the world? Because this was the only way to introduce free will. We actually agree there's no free will, right? I think, we decided not to do that debate because we should do an agree-abate for that particular topic. But back when I was a Christian, I actually used free will as a way to actually explain away that question. Right, so again, imperfect world. There will be ways that you can justify, right? In God's eyes, it is perfect. You know, eventually, this is the only way to give real choice. Maybe He has created the world in such a way you're just unable to see it. But that's precisely why I mentioned in my arguments what is the more likely idea, that a God intentionally created a world which is this natural looking. It's like he's trolling us, right? Basically, he's just saying like, I'm right here, but I'm going to make everything make sense to you so that you can't really detect where I am. Right? I can think, any one of us can think of any bunch of interesting way. Make Earth a cube with huge glass walls, and every day the outside world changes to various different things, and make it respond to whatever is happening currently. When the lolcat gets popular on YouTube, make giant cats fly outside, and you know that somebody is watching us and updating the screensaver outside. And from there, you know that is an intelligent creator. Right? One day we may get to a situation where we are powerful enough computer programmers and we're powerful enough machines to create a computer simulation where we put a lot of AI characters, and we just to see whether religion naturally evolves, right? And we would have the opportunity to test this question. We will create natural worlds and see whether we sufficiently trolled them. We will create that glass cube and put Nyan Cat all over the screensavers and see whether they develop religion more or not. And from there, maybe that will help us understand our own situation a little bit better in the future. But the point is this: what is more likely, right? From all these natural explanations that you can find that are consistent with each other. By the way, science doesn't explain away things, right? Science doesn't work based on logic, mind you. Remember a very famous Einstein saying that God does not play games with dice. The question of his atheism is all over the place. But the point is that he didn't agree. He couldn't accept that quantum mechanics is illogical, right? Quantum mechanics, as one of the founders initially said, if you think you understand it, you don't. And that is how insane quantum mechanics is. But the science of it is still there, right? It defies all logical expectations, and it is still there, and it fits with everything else, right? It doesn't stand out in a weird way or anything like that. Now on the question, the rest of these questions, I think it deals with the fourth point which I actually brought up, whether you are actually capable of seeing that God is essentially a non-explanation for everything. The first cause, that it is actually the thing which put the planets into motion, and so on. Newton was, again, a very unfortunate example in this particular case, because essentially it was Newton who had to write in his mathematical calculations that, look, I figured out the motion of the planets, but the maths doesn't work that well, so I think that God corrects these orbits every now and then, otherwise everything will fly off into space. And when Laplace found a better explanation, a better calculation for everything, he did not need the God hypothesis. And this is essentially what I meant by the fact that God has essentially been retreating in the face of science for a very long time. So if we're talking about probabilities, which is essentially what atheists work with, in the past there is possibly reasonably good explanations due to the number of unknowns in the world. As the number of unknowns decrease over time, as the number of unknowns are answered, the number of future unknowns are actually increasing. If you think about it, if you think of science as a circle or knowledge as a circle, the bigger the circle gets, the larger the periphery becomes, right? The question again is whether you're comfortable with it or you need to have an answer now, and that is essentially God. Thanks.
And now we have the closing statements from both sides. Willie will start first and then followed by Samuel. They will summarize the entire debate and how their position fared, and they will not be allowed to respond to the other person's closing statement. Okay, so now I invite Willie to start.
Right. As I mentioned during the rebuttal, I've essentially tried to give you an idea of how the average atheist works or thinks, right? And this is basically the process which most atheists go through. Sometimes a lot of atheists come out of religion, right? We think some things don't make sense, as we notice ourselves justifying more things, we go back to the drawing board a little bit and realize how is this logical? And some of us who have the opportunity will go and check out other religions. Right? Some of us will compare it based on our understanding of the world. And the tensions between a lot of information makes us actually realize that there is actually a very special position which we're placing religion on. And once we come out of that illusion, that is essentially what makes us an atheist. And that is essentially the argument that I tried to put before you today. Now, notice that I'm not dealing with proofs. Right? I'm not proving that God does not exist. Neither am I proving that there can never possibly be a God. We're essentially talking about the way in which we deal with every other aspect of our lives based on the information that we have in the future. So that is essentially how atheists actually behave. From Samuel's side, you have heard a philosophical argument, the cosmological argument, you've heard a moral argument, and you've heard about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So basically, you have a lot of philosophy which I find was actually tacked on after the fact. There are a lot of people who may be religious, may want to think that a lot of scientists, by the way, back in the day, point out that the Big Bang is not an indication for the beginning of something. If you take the positive and negative particles that exist at the beginning of the universe, you get zero energy. Basically, in case, I guess, somebody says that you needed something to start it, it is entirely possible that the Big Bang started due to no reason at all, due to quantum fluctuations which you can observe and create in a lab, right? So, but without that scientific background, without reading into what he's actually trying to say, a lot of press and newspapers wrote sensational things about saying Hawking thinks that he has actually proven God does not exist. It doesn't work that way, right? So, but that is essentially the point. Philosophical arguments are fine, but they don't actually give you answers at the end of the day. What actually works and what actually doesn't. And if you truly understand the philosophy of what you're doing, you will notice that God is actually not an explanation for everything. Now, I would like to use the rest of my closing to talk a little bit about this conversation. Right, this is the fourth debate or panel that I've done on this specific topic myself. The fourth one, coincidentally, that the atheists have done with Samuel. And it's always interesting since they always turn out a little bit different, and I'm always a little bit excited for the audience questions that will come a little bit later. I guess we won't see anybody trying to grill him or me because it's all going to be through Joshua, but hopefully still interesting nonetheless. I agree to these debates nonetheless because I think it's important to bring our communities together so that we may better understand each other's point of views. And in a country like this, atheists agree to debates like this just to remind people that we exist, that we're really a lot like everybody else, and that we're a growing portion of the voting bloc. So, ladies and gentlemen, what does it mean to be an atheist? What is it like not believing in the existence of God? It boils down to a couple of things. Are you humble enough to admit that you and humanity does not have all the answers? Can you be comfortable enough to live with your ignorance and be satisfied that there's a system to improve it, but it takes a lot of hard work? And in the absence of easy answers, are you diligent enough to do the hard work which ensures that you have as many of the facts as possible to make decisions in your life? So far, it sounds a lot like being a Christian. But I guess the last point is the differentiating factor. Are you then courageous enough to realize that there is no meaning to be found, but that it rests on your own shoulders and no one else's to decide what is the right course of action for your life. And you know what? As long as everybody is free to believe or disbelieve, we have no quarrel with each other. Right? Thank you all so much for coming to this event, and I hope that you have an enlightening or at least an entertaining morning. I look forward to your questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Willie, for your closing statement. And now for Samuel for his closing statement. He has 5 minutes.
Thank you. In this closing statement, I want to take this opportunity to thank Willie for agreeing to participate in this debate again. I have high levels of respect for him, and I do apologize if anything I said may have come across offensive or seemed disingenuous. It was not intended. The next thing, I also want to thank the Explain team for helping out. They've been tirelessly working, particularly Aaron. Thank you very much. And also, do want to thank Modern Day Debate for allowing us to stream this on your channel. And also to Jingmin and the rest of the MCKL group for actually hosting it. It's truly an honor and pleasure to be able to present our different contrasting cases with you. It's so interesting to know that in the internet, sometimes when you look at the comment section, how people blast each other out. And sometimes you lose hope in humanity just reading those comments. But when you actually see how an atheist and a Christian can actually sit down and have a conversation like this, respecting one another, you realize that actually intellectual discourse is the way to go. I have to take his question seriously. And friends, this debate was not 1 year in the making, was not 2 years. It was about 6 to 7 years in the making. The last time I debated Willie, I lost pretty badly, and I conceded that. So, but the difference is this. There were a lot of things that Willie brought out back then that I just simply didn't understand. He brought out good questions. Questions that he brought out again today. But the difference is this. I went back and I studied all those questions. I looked through them, but let me tell you what I did not do. I didn't look through them just to find a response. A lot of people do that. It's intellectual laziness and it's a shortcut. I considered them and really empathized with them. And sometimes, in fact, as I've said in another one debate that I did last year, I've nearly lost my faith a couple of times as well to objections that have come, because I seriously take the objections. Today, I don't think I found any serious objections to my faith, but I tell you this, when the first time I debated Willie, I did feel them. And the difference is this, when you here, one, you can still have faith, believing there can be answers, and pursue the answers until you find no answer. No meaningful way to reconcile this. Or you could basically say, I give up on my faith and go. I want to share with you the story of a boy by the name of John who met me. He was an atheist. He came to my church on the Sunday I was preaching on the passage in the Bible which says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. By the way, in and of itself, the Hebrew word nabal means something rather different. But the thing is, what was interesting is that he seemed offended by that in the debate, but he seemed open to learn. In fact, what we did is, he told me halfway that I'm an atheist, that I'm here. I actually told him I would love to hear your objections. So the day after my Sunday preaching, it was a Monday, it was my off day. I actually met him in my church office, and I wanted to hear his objections. It was him that was actually running the conversation. In fact, I have a feeling he's not here right now. He's in the US. I have a feeling he's watching this live. But the thing is, John, the thing with John is this. He was asking me a variety of different questions, and at the end of which I was hoping for an opportunity to engage them. I didn't get an opportunity to, so I just simply told him this, that Jesus loves you and he gave his life. If you only believed in him, he would forgive you. Now, I was expecting John to make fun of me and ridicule me, as typically some atheists might do, because they make fun of that. I'm hoping maybe that gives me an opportunity to deal with the objections. But that statement startled John very much. And what happened is that he began telling me that he was afraid, and that shocked me, because why was he afraid? And he said something in his heart told him to run out of that room. And I told him, what is there? You have got to tell me, you're an atheist. You don't believe in any of these things. And he told me, something is making me very uncomfortable. He told me, can I think about it and get back to you? And for some reason, I told him, if God wants to forgive you and you want to think about it, I wouldn't do that if I were you. But you can choose what to do, whatever you want to do. He bowed down his hands. He put his hands between his face and he said, I believe. His name is John, so he was a student here in MCKL, and some of you may actually know who I'm referring to. His life was changed after that. And the truth is this, if Jesus did rise from the dead, The transforming power of life still exists. Those miracles are not in the past. They are very much active today. And all you need to do to access them is believe in him, not by a blind faith, but through the evidences, the many evidences that have already been offered today. It's been a pleasure being with you. I thank Willie once again, and thank you, Joshua, as well, for moderating. God bless you all.
Okay, that was a very enjoyable debate, and it's not completely over yet. What I will do is we have a whole series of questions here that you have submitted, which we will address to the two sides. And halfway through this, we will pause for a moment to get the votes, alright, or at least to make the voting. And then after that, once we have addressed all the other remaining questions, hopefully by then the organizers would have counted all the figures and given us the results, alright? So let's first start out with the most popular question on the list. Some of you who have access to that website, you can see the speakers don't know any of these questions at this point in time. And what I'll do is I will take turns, alternate between the two speakers. So each speaker gets 1 minute to respond to one question, and then I will take the next question to the next person. Now there are some questions on this list that are addressed to both sides, so I will also allow both sides to give their 1 minute responses. And then like after 3 or 4 questions, we have taken 3 or 4 questions, there's a long list, then we will go into voting. Okay, let's begin. The first and most popular question asked by Anonymous at 10:04 a.m. with 16, okay, 17 likes. Some of you are accessing the website now, okay, is addressed to Samuel, right? If Osama bin Laden, peace be upon his departed soul, believed in Jesus Christ right before he got shot by SEAL Team 6, would he be in heaven now? Let me repeat that question. If Osama bin Laden believed in Jesus Christ right before he got shot, would he be in heaven now? And I think it would be addressed to Samuel. So Samuel, you got 1 minute to respond.
If Osama bin Laden believed in Jesus, the short answer is yes, he has to be. Now the question really behind that question is it just? Does it really make sense of justice, or does it make a mockery of it? And my response is simple. The sins that Osama bin Laden committed would have to be judged. He deserves to die for whatever he has done. And the difference is when he believes in Christ, it's not as if God winks and closes one eye. Jesus lays his life down for his sins. Someone else died in his place instead. And it doesn't matter how big your sin is. What matters is how big a Savior you have. If Jesus truly is God in flesh, he has the power to atone for an infinite amount of sins because he is of infinite quality himself. Had Osama believed him, that sins would have been transferred into Jesus' account, so to speak, and the righteousness of Jesus would have been transferred. But somehow I don't think that happened.
God save America. Shout out to all our American brothers, okay? Number 2. Now this question is also, I mean, since, you know, we're going to ask Willie this question, so I will choose the question asked by Hao Fu. For both Samuel and Willie, but I'll ask Willie first. In your opinion, what would you consider to be the strongest case or evidence for the opposing side? Yes.
All right, very easy. It's the problem of evil. The problem of evil is the easiest to philosophically, and I think I totally understand where Willie is coming from when he says that, you know, sometimes you can respond to these Christians in a philosophical way, but there's something far more than that that needs to be addressed. And I think the problem of evil is easy to philosophically resolve because God could have good reasons for permitting or even decreeing evil for that matter. But it seems to me that the emotional side of it is so hard. Why does God do that? Particularly if you're a believer in God, why does God allow bad things to happen to believers? For me, that is one of the strongest objections because it deals with the emotional state of the questioner. There's usually masked in a very intellectual way, but very often there's an emotional side that needs to address that is far more difficult to address than all of the other intellectual arguments that have been presented.
I guess that the one would be the last point, you know, the one which I said I struggled with a little bit. The logic, the atheism logic is there, right? I struggled with finding how to worship Him. I struggled with reconciling what I know about the world with God's existence. I realized I was an atheist. I didn't like decide whatever. I didn't even know the term agnosticism. But the last part was like, okay, now all this makes sense to me now. So you feel that you have lost something. This something that you feel you have lost. Some people call it the proper basic. I think you've used this before. Belief in God or whatever it is. So I think that part is still the strongest justification. Every now and then you go like, there's injustice in the world. You know, somebody has to send somebody to hell for this. You know, that kind of feeling, or the kind of feeling where you feel that you need something to explain, something to make sense of things and whatnot. At the end of the day, that's why I say the struggle with atheism then is not maintaining your faith, but understanding that these things are, you know, your wishing points, things that you wish you had, but they're not there.
Actually, Willie didn't really answer the question, because it is, you're asking for evidence for the opposing side that will be very convincing. Where does it say? Where did it go? What's the strongest case or evidence?
I think
yeah, so that was
I think he answered the question.
Okay. Anyway.
And I'm shocked by the answer, actually, really. That's revelation to me.
Justice must be served. Okay. Now, we're going to ask one more question that some people have been upvoting. So we're going to ask that question and then we're going to go to voting. Now, is LGBTQ plus discriminated under God's law? Why is it so if God loves everyone? Samuel.
It would depend on how you define LGBTQ plus, whatever acronym you want to put behind that. But the thing is, homosexuality has been one of the most misunderstood subjects, I think, that we need to deal with. And it'll be something that I'm speaking as well towards the end of this year. The answer, in a sense, is the Bible doesn't actually discriminate against the homosexual, the individual. It is homosexuality, the action, that is against, that Scripture strongly condemns. In fact, the Scripture says, if a man sleeps with a man or lies with a man, it's the action that is condemned in Scripture. So it would seem to me that if a person simply has the desire of LGBTs, now I know this is a controversial point and I don't expect you, I expect you to mock my answer, if that makes sense. But the fact of the matter is, the Scripture, particularly in the New Testament, I'll recommend you to a good article written by Ng Kam Wing, a Malaysian theologian, on this, where he says how the New Testament, God expects the person who is actually suffering with these dispositions to be able to change. To say that it cannot change is not true, I believe.
I don't think so. It's more fun. Okay, I'll just give you one more question and we'll go to the voting. Let me see. This question is for Willie. If there is no God or concept of deity, what do you believe is the purpose of humanity?
Very common question. Basically, I sort of answered this in the closing, right? Basically, you figure out what it is. I like to say, and this like shocks people, but I guess that's good because it makes people remember it. You are God. Like some people get very like upset with that, but I mean in terms of choices, right? In terms of the things that you decide to do. Bear in mind, I don't actually believe in the free will, right? But the illusion of free will is real. At the end of the day, there's no purpose to be found. There's no external force, if you like, which is gonna tell you what to do. So you have to do the work, figure out how the world works, and then decide how best you can apply yourself. But yeah, you're gonna have to decide for yourself.
Yeah, 30 seconds. Okay, now we will stop here and we will now take a vote. Now the vote is, after hearing all the arguments, do you still believe that God exists or does not exist? And so if you still hold your position, you just put a Y. If you lose your position, or you started out with a Y and now you change to an N, then you write an N, or vice versa. That means if you started out with an N and you said, well, after listening, there could be a possibility, a remote as it is, for me to believe, you put a Y. And then if you're undecided, you put a U. Now, if you were undecided at the beginning and you're still undecided now, you can still put U. It's okay, right? So I mean, you just state your why lah. If you nobody knows actually whether you started out with an N and then you switch to a Y. Nobody knows. We don't have any kind of tracking kind of thing. You just state whether you now believe or now entertain the possibility of the belief of either side.
I think there's a bit of confusion. Initially, what you said was if you changed your position, put a Y.
Oh, no. No, what I mean is, changing of position is allowed, as in we would, it's up to you whether you want to change. Correct. You just write your position, meaning that if you had changed your position from a Y to an N, then you just put an N. You get me? Basically, you answer the question. Yeah, just answer the question, right? So, what is your current position now? I mean, if you didn't change, then this doesn't apply to you. But if you were undecided at the beginning and you then became more clear, then you write either Y or you write N. Does that make sense? Okay, just in case you don't know why we are doing this, it's because this determines the outcome of the debate. That means the debater that manages to sway the most audience members to their position based on numbers will be the winner of this debate. So if in the case of Samuel or Willie, we have an initial count of, let's say, 50 people who said Y. Now at the end of today's debate, like now that you're voting, if let's say 55% of the people have now said they believe in God, and let's say Willie doesn't get that 5% increase from his side is equivalent, it means when the debate started, there were 30% who believed that there was no God, and then at the end of the debate there's still 30% who don't believe that there's a God. Samuel will win the debate, right? So that's how we are counting the numbers today. So if you have already voted your position, please pass it to the red box. And now we will carry on with the Q&A because there are a lot of questions, right? Some of which are quite interesting as well. Now, so this whole Q&A stuff is just for fun, right? Because the earlier Q&A questions would serve to help and influence your perception on your vote. But now that you've already cast your vote, this is more like, yeah. Okay, so we're gonna take all the highest voting questions we have not already done. Okay. The next one is 18 with 18 votes at 1026. If the love of money is the root of all evil, why do they pass around offering bags, asking for money in church?
Right.
I think it's for Samuel. He will still given 1 minute, and at 30 seconds we'll give you 1 ring of the bell, and at 1 minute we'll give you 2 rings.
All right, great question. Now the fact is, my dad is a pastor. He's sitting right there. The fact of the matter is, in his church, he doesn't actually collect offerings, so it's not applicable to the church currently I attend. So it's a box kept there. Whoever wants to give can give. But the question is a good one. It's the love of money, the root of all evil. I think sometimes, whether you're Christian or non-Christian or religious, you can abuse the name of God to basically pursue money, and I think that's very dangerous. And I think the question highlights that.
Okay, thank you.
It doesn't answer.
Okay, this is again a question to Willie. Atheists don't believe that there is life after death. So what do you think is the purpose of living then if you're just going to die and nothing happens after? Okay, this question kind of answered earlier. Yeah, maybe you can share with us your purpose or what you have found.
I currently have no purpose in life. See, but the reason why I say that is to condemn education mainly. I actually I thought university was a horrible experience for me. I mean, it's a wonderful, horrible experience for me. I had to turn it into something which I actually enjoyed. But I decided that what I was good at was what needed to be done, what created the most impact was probably education. You can make the most difference to the most number of people. That's the reason why I do debates like this and so on. So you haven't actually been in the system, you haven't taught before, so get into it, see what it's like. I've done that. I have tried changing things from the top down. I have tried doing things from the bottoms up. and people won't change. And the reason why many of you guys here are students, the reason why you have to sit in lectures full of extremely boring stuff that basically kills all your brain cells is because your adults don't really know how to teach you. They just want to make sure that you make good robots when you graduate because you're very obedient, right? So that's why I say I have no purpose in life right now. I'm trying to figure out what's the next step, so I'm gathering information.
Right. Now this question for Samuel. If the person offering you salvation is also the one threatening you with punishment, it's not really salvation, it is extortion. Michael Sherlock. It's from a quote by this guy called Michael Sherlock. Please justify or justify.
Alright, I think that the problem is it misconstrues the idea that God is either has to be merely loving or merely just. And I think the fact is both hold true. And the thing is this, Willie asked me a question the last time we had this cross-examination a year ago. Does God tell us, is an action good because God says so, or is an action good because God knows it is good? Now my answer to Willie back then was that an action is good because that is how God is. God's nature is the benchmark of morality. Now to answer this question, when you look at the cross, which is really one of my arguments today, you see a demonstration of both love and justice. God was killed at that cross. God himself hung naked, dying. It was the most evil act ever happened. But at the same time, it was also the most loving act that has ever happened. So it seems to me that the cross can demonstrate how God can be perfectly just and also be perfectly loving. And I think that would resolve the issue of hell being either very unloving or completely just to the extent that God is no love. Hell is not a distortion. If you don't want God, as C.S. Lewis says, one of the best things God can do is to let you have your own way.
Okay, thank you. Now this is a question for Willie. For Willie, the desire to help fellow men sounds like an argument on the basis of human conscience. Where do you think human conscience comes from?
There is research that shows that it is possible. So they've been domesticating foxes in Russia, right? So one of the good examples of an experiment which actually changes the nature of creatures. So through evolution, similar things can probably have happened. The experiment basically does intelligent selection. We're messing with them, but natural selection can do the same thing as well, right? If groups which are naturally less aggressive and less violent and more capable of working together survives a little bit better, they will pass their non-violent, non-aggressive genes down, right? So it's actually, there's a pretty good evolutionary reason for the origins of perhaps the traits needed for people to start working together. But the modern answer, as in after evolution, right, we've gotten to this point, what then works is laws, right? Sitting down philosophy, talking to each other, figuring out what each other want, moral relativism, not the objective kind.
Okay, got that. Now this is for Samuel. The fact that Jesus can be proved as a person doesn't prove that there is God.
That's absolutely right. I mean, I don't think the fact that the historical Jesus existed is in any way, shape or form proof for the existence of God, but rather it's the historicity of the resurrection that really attests to the fact that it's not just God exists, but the God of the Christian Bible exists, because to bring someone out of the dead, and mind you, it's not resuscitation only to die again. The fact is Jesus rose bodily from the dead, leaving an empty tomb behind. If that statement holds true, it follows necessarily that God exists. So again, I think this is a misunderstanding. It's not the existence of the historical Jesus, but the resurrection. And I think I've presented a strong case for that today. And I've also done a previous debate on that you can find on YouTube.
Now there's a question that says, for both speakers, so I'll start with Willie first. For both speakers, do you believe that there is a significant difference if a life is motivated by a belief or lack of belief in God? If so, why?
You have 24 hours a day, so would the life be different? Yeah, I think it would be. You would spend Sunday in church, or you would have Sunday free to do what you want. Obviously, some people might just play games all day. I'm guilty of that every now and then, but you would also have your time freed up to do certain things, right? So the incompatibility of the two things is significant based on the available time that you have to spend. Some decisions that you make sometimes, despite all the evidence in the world, LGBTQ is a pretty good example. Objective morality in some Baptist churches says that LGBT people are okay. I actually looked it up before the previous debate. Apparently in Malaysia, that brand of objective morality hasn't gotten here yet. So that actually also impacts your life, right? The kind of things that you're willing to support and the kind of things that you're not willing to support. So definitely, I think there's a significant difference.
Okay. So Samuel, do you believe that there is a significant difference if a life is motivated by a belief in God? If so, why?
I certainly think it is. There will be. I mean, for example, the rise of nihilism has been often attributed to, say, the stark belief, looking in the face and realizing if there is no purpose, let's eat or drink, for tomorrow we die. And that sort of hedonistic practice was practiced actually by the Romans, a lot of them, particularly from the Epicurean stream of thought. But I think that, let me just speak about my own life and tell you why this has made a difference. I'm actually, one of the things that I still do is that I'm a commentator for Astro. When you watch badminton matches and you see live badminton commentary, and that's a big smash, Lee Chong Wei, that's usually my voice that you're hearing on TV. And when you hear that sometimes, so I had the opportunity of doing the Thomas Cup qualifying. I was the sole commentator for that last year. One of the things that I had an opportunity to do is to pursue that as a professional commentator, and even try working for other companies like Fox and all that, Fox Sports Asia and all that. But the other thing is, for me, my calling, because I believe in God's existence, is that I need to help people see the truth of this. Now, you may mock that, and I leave that to you to mock. But if that's true, that's the reason why I'm not pursuing that and pursuing this instead.
Okay. Now to Willie, wouldn't you like to have the hope that there is a higher being looking out for you? Are you happy relying on yourself?
I wish I had a Ferrari, but I don't.
Okay, this is for Samuel. If the Christian God is the one true God, what about communities, tribes, people who have never got in touch with this Christian God all their life?
If there was any possibility that those tribal communities could get saved, then I think the greatest evil we can ever do to those communities is to preach to them the gospel, that Jesus died and those who believe in him have eternal life. You see, because now guess what you've done? You've just condemned an entire group. But no, I believe that Christ is the means of salvation, the only means of salvation. And if that is true, I have to take the gospel wherever it costs me, and I have to take the gospel to dangerous places. And that, I think, Willie would agree, is being consistent with at least my purpose. You may disagree with the objectivity of the purpose, but you have to agree that I'm being consistent. And that's why a lot of people were mocking the guy, and I leave that to you to decide. The American missionary that went to the Andaman Islands, you may mock him, you may say he was a fool to did what he did. But the fact of the matter, if you're motivated by the idea that salvation is only by the name of Jesus, that was really the most loving thing to do.
Okay, now for Willie. Since you're an atheist, do you say the Rukun Negara? And isn't it illegal to be an atheist in Malaysia?
That's two questions, right?
You get 2 minutes.
The Rukun Negara is an aspiration. It's not the constitution, it's not law, it's an aspiration. Please get it into your heads. It's like, you know, like beautiful things people say. It was beautiful at the time. It's good. It's something that brings people together, right? It's sort of like the values that your company has when you join it, and it says these are the values of our company. Right, and they would like you to demonstrate it. It improves social cohesion, blah 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 blah, and so on. At that time, I don't think there were very many atheists around. Most people were probably agnostic. Most people probably didn't speak up that much. So at a table where a whole bunch of people are sitting down discussing what we should put down as the country's aspirations, I wouldn't be surprised that such a sentence is there. Right, so it's not actually illegal to actually be an atheist in this country. But putting that aside, you cannot choose your belief. I don't think whether some people realize this. I think Malaysia, it is very weird because some people actually think that you can force belief into people. You cannot choose to believe things which you don't. This is a frog. You want to believe that this is a frog. It does not work that way. You cannot tell somebody that it is illegal for you to be unable to believe something. Because belief, for some people, you can talk about faith and all that, you could make the effort to, but you cannot, at the end of the day, actually choose your belief when it comes to things which just completely doesn't fit in your head. And if you're going to condemn people and say that it's illegal to be the way they are and whatnot, you're not creating a world which people can coexist along with you. So, and if your objective morality tells you that that is the kind of world that must exist, then there's something wrong with your objective morality. Thanks.
Okay. There's this thing called freedom of conscience. Okay, which is what Willie was talking about. Now the next question. Jesus exists, but that doesn't mean God exists. Everyone were idiots back then that just believed what they heard and didn't challenge any thoughts.
Okay, that first of all, that's not a question. That's an assertion. But let me tell you why that assertion is false. Because people didn't question anything they believed. Have you read the gospel accounts? Have you actually read the disciples' initial statement? Mary Magdalene sees the empty tomb. She sees Jesus, doesn't recognize him. Ask him, thinks he's the gardener. Can you tell me where they've taken the body? Because you see, if there's an empty tomb, the logical explanation is body goes missing. Someone has taken it. And you know, Jesus shows her who he is, and the women take the story to the disciples. Do they believe it? They don't. You know what happened later that day? Jesus appears to 2 more disciples. They tell the rest. Do they believe it? They don't. Jesus himself appears. Guess what they felt? The Gospel of Luke. They thought they saw a ghost. Anything but the resurrection. And you know what happened? Jesus eats fish to convince them it's him. They still don't believe out of sheer amazement. Read the Gospel of Luke, chapter 22. And after all of this, you would think it would be sufficient. Thomas, still knowing the rest of the disciples, what they're saying, comes to him and says, unless I touch him, I still won't believe. No, they were not a bunch of simpletons. Those were hardline skeptics. In fact, I would say more skeptical than some of the atheists we have today. They were Jews. It's not their religion, and that's my point, that they believed it despite every predisposition to the contrary.
Actually, you also could have mentioned Paul. Anyway.
The bell.
Yeah, I know. Okay, now this for Willie. It's a question for both. Actually, there's quite a number of questions for Samuel, so I'm, having to balance things a little bit. All right. Now this is for both debaters, so I'll ask Willie first. Is suffering necessary? What is the philosophical stand on and view of suffering?
I think this question is for Samuel. When you observe nature, you take things as it is, right? So suffering is a part of nature. So the question of whether it's necessary or not doesn't really come into the picture. When you design a future for mankind, then definitely suffering should not be necessary wherever possible. So when you put together laws, when you sit down to decide how the world should work together, anything which makes a lot of sense in terms of reducing suffering, while taking into account, whatever, there's a whole debate argument. There's a good Stanford professor, I can't remember not Stanford, Harvard professor, there's a very good moral or ethics debate, series of lectures, you can look that up, right? There's consequentialism, there's categorism, and so on. There's a huge moral discussion about how to determine things, and part of it is making sure that suffering doesn't continue in the world based in societies that we create.
Okay, so for Samuel, can you please also answer this same question? Is suffering necessary? What is the philosophical stand and view of suffering?
I don't think suffering is necessary, but I think suffering may be good. Now, I know that's a shocking statement. Let me read to you Romans chapter 5, verses 3 to 5. It says, "Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope, and hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us." So the Christian worldview is not that suffering is necessary, but suffering can be sometimes good. And I know that sounds like a contradiction, but the fact of the matter is even the Bible says about Jesus in the book of Hebrews, he learned obedience to suffering. So which means suffering is able to produce something for the Christian that will not be able to be achieved without of it. Only in the light of Christ, I believe, is suffering redeemed because we have a God that suffers with us in our suffering and empathizes with us.
This is for Willie. Who is to say that we are actually not AIs in a natural world making experiments on ourselves or on us? If so, could those experimenters be gods? It's a bit of a convoluted question.
I think it should be, shouldn't there be a programmer outside of space and time, which is, then it's basically God. Actually, that's what I like to say about the theory. You can actually ascribe any kind of property to God. So my favorite one is actually that he's a computer programmer running simulations, because this is something we might end up doing one day. As you create AI, our AI currently is like idiots. They are not self-aware or whatever it is, but who knows, you know, one day if they are self-aware and we don't have the standard of ethics, or it is decided in an ethics committee that it's okay to subject them to a simulation to see whether they will develop the way we develop. One of the major questions which people will want to answer is whether they are capable of developing religion independently. But I don't think we will ever allow ourselves to do that. So if there's a computer programmer which created the universe we're in right now and is watching us in glee, or actually he's probably fast forwarding, you know, his computer is probably so powerful, he just click a button and then he gets the end result and he doesn't even know our names. But if that guy exists, it's probably a little bit sadistic by our moral standards at least. So.
Okay, religion exists just for power and a cover-up for the flaws by human. What's your perspective of this statement?
Well, it has certainly. I would be happy to acknowledge that it certainly has been used for that sense. I'm not a proponent of the idea that religion is always good. I think religion has been used for all sorts of evil, to manipulate people and to control people, and you've heard me right. But I think the question is very surface. You need to go beyond that question and to ask, what is there so inherently powerful and potent within religion itself that enables it to get such a prominent position in the hearts of men? And I think there I'll refer you back again to Deborah Kellerman's research from Boston University, where if I understand Romans chapter 1 correctly, God has put a sense of himself in our hearts. It's already there, and that's what people are using in order to hold the vulnerable, basically to manipulate the masses. Now, the only reason they can manipulate them is because God has put that vulnerability there. I'm sure Willie may pick that up and say that's an example of imperfect creation, but the fact is, for me, it still is evidence that God has put the awareness of God there. No doubt, people can certainly use it to manipulate it to their own ends.
I'm going to say Microsoft Windows get more viruses because more people use it.
Okay, so religion still is the predominant operating system in some sense. Now we're going to take two more questions. The results are in, by the way. So we're just going to take two more questions, and for both of you. Let me see the highest ranking. Okay, this is going to be Willie's last cross-examination question from the audience, and I'm going to ask Sam another different question, alright? So to Willie, what do you believe happens when someone dies?
Yeah, I could answer that.
You die. The Bible says you go to Sheol when you die, right? And the literal translation from that language is actually the common grave. So there's like a bunch of debates, but ironically that's actually I'm sure there's a whole bunch of story behind it, but since he doesn't get to answer this question, right? Grass will grow on your grave, you will fertilize the next generation, anything you leave behind, your Facebook photos especially, go back and check them, goes on into the next generation, yeah. One day we may get the technology. There's a very good Netflix show called Altered Carbon, check it out. Immortality may come in the form of uploading yourself into computation. It may happen to this generation. I don't know about our generation, but that could be some form of weird immortality. But you know, it still doesn't feel right because you know that thing is probably a different thing from us. But yeah, when you die, essentially you die. So there's no weird answer in atheism about what happens after death.
Okay, now this is a question for Samuel, and it's kind of related to that as well. Did God set us up for destruction? in Christianity, if we don't believe in Jesus, we end up going to hell. In that sense, is Christianity really a choice at all?
No, I think certainly there is a choice to be made by individuals. The question is, does God decree the future? And here my answer may not be shared by the rest of the Christian folks. I mean, there are a variety of different answers. You can look up Calvinism, Molinism, and Arminianism. But the position that I hold to, I'm a Calvinist, and I believe that God decrees the ends from the beginning. So if that's the case, I believe that the outcome has certainly been decreed by God, yes. I believe certain people were decreed for judgment. And again, I think Romans chapter 9 indicates that. And for example, the Bible says about Pharaoh, I raised you up for this reason, that I may show my power in you and through you, that his name may be glorified. So I certainly think, yes, it's not a popular answer. It's not an answer that I expect people to readily embrace, but I have to be consistent with whatever Scripture says.
Yeah, becoming more common. Okay, now that is the end of the Q&A session, and now we're going to announce the results. So it seems that Willie is the winner of the debate. Because Samuel loses 6%, Willie gains 3%, and so the person that gets the highest gain in percentage wins the debate. So Willie wins the debate. Okay, so now that the result is out, okay, now I'm going to pass the time now. I'm going to thank Samuel Nesan and Willie Poh for this lively debate, and the audience also for casting your votes. And my own take on this is that it's good that this dialogue carries on, or at least this conversation carries on between believer and unbeliever, and we keep our communication lines open. So we may have future debates in the future or not. We'll see how it goes. And here's to more informed discussions. Have a good day, and there's some makan courtesy of the Christian Fellowship outside, so you can have some finger food after this. So I'm going to pass the time over to our capable and amazing MC, Mr. Ross Stevens, to give a token of appreciation.
Thank you very much. Hey, let's give a big round of applause to our moderator, our timekeeper. Thank you, Mr. Yashua. And Nicholas, thank you so much. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter who wins. One's going to heaven, one's going to hell, right? No. Jesus wins in the end, right? Can I get an amen? I always wonder. I'll just give a few minutes because Sam had to rush to the toilet. I was holding it in, holding the bladder in. I went toilet like 2 times. I don't know how you all tahan. You all need to go toilet or not? Okay, don't go yet, don't go yet. I just want to give the token of appreciation. I'm just going to give him a few minutes to quickly come back before that. But yeah, I enjoyed the debate. I always love listening to Willie speak. He's always got a good point. Samuel also has great points. And it's nice to see. This time, the first time I'm seeing the voting though. The last time we did the debate, we didn't do a voting thingy. So it's nice to see. You guys can take a picture and analyze that. So it's really nice. I've got to stall for a bit of time. So, yes, I have a very important announcement to make. I apologize for not making this earlier. I'm going to give a disclaimer. Okay, just pay attention to this disclaimer. Today's event is an intellectual event. Yeah, it's an intellectual discourse. This is not a religious event. I repeat, this is not a religious event. The topic is about the existence of God. Does God exist? It's not about should you believe in a particular God or should you not believe in God at all. It is about whether or not God exists. Okay, just wanted to put that disclaimer out there because we live in this country. I tell you, I love the question, kepercayaan kepada Tuhan, whether, atheists say the maka kami rakyat Malaysia. I read a reply online actually about that, how an atheist addressed that. It's actually quite good. It's not law. It's a, what do you call it? aspiration. It's a beautiful aspiration, but it's not law. So that's a nice question. We always love the question answer session because they don't really get to see, you know, the slightly more comical side of the atheist. Always whenever I MC debates, I always get scared because I really want to avoid Hitler coming up in the conversation. The last debate we had, Hitler la, Old Testament la, killing la, murder. I'm so glad Hitler didn't come up in this debate, you know. We got Nyan Cat, we got altered carbon, we got the blunt knife la, that one's quite common. But that's good. So please don't use Hitler and please don't go on YouTube and find... Okay, he's back. Okay, I'm done stalling. Alright. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to give a token of appreciation to both our speakers, Willie to come up on stage. Let's give Willie a big round of applause. Thank you so much, Willie. Appreciate you. Appreciate your time. And also, let's give Samuel a big round of applause. We've got a token of appreciation I want to pass to him. This is on behalf of MCKL. Once again, thank you so much, MCKL Christian Fellowship, for organizing all of this. Please give a big round of applause to the committee. Thank you, committee. Great job. Thank you very much. Elisa, do you have any more announcements to make after this? Take picture, group picture. Okay, let's take a quick picture. Yeah, we'll get our speakers on stage together with Mr. Andrew. You want to take picture? Come, Mr. Andrew, come. Mr. Andrew, come, represent MCKL. Moderator as well. Mr. Joshua, could you kindly join us on stage as well? We'll get all of you for a nice group picture. Who's our photographer? There we go. Yep. MCKL just to represent lah. No need code. It's okay. Okay, smile. Big smile. Everybody say Jesus. Atheists can say Jesus. Atheists talk more about Jesus than some pastors. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, let's give them all a big round of applause one more time. Thank you so much for being here once again. We really appreciate you and hopefully we can see more debates like this in the future. There's a little bit of finger food left outside. Our event is officially over. Remember, this is not a religious event, it's an intellectual event. Please continue to have conversations amongst your friends, your family, people that you're with, the communities. If you have any other, you want to talk to Willie, he's going to be here for a while more. Samuel is going to be here for a while more. You want to... The good place, someone from in the middle here, yeah. So, yeah, one guy in the whole audience. So if you want to talk to Willie or Sam, they're going to be here for a short while more. You can engage them. Perhaps follow their Facebook pages. Explain Apologetics on Willie's side, and I think MASH, if I'm not mistaken, for the atheist community. So please go ahead and keep up to date with them because they're going to be having more and more debates in time to come. Yeah, once again, event is over. You can now leave. Thank you so much for coming. And my God, the MC was amazing tonight, wasn't he? Thank you guys very much. I like to angkat bakul sendiri because if I don't do it, nobody else will do it, so I might as well. There's a little bit of finger food outside. Please take some tidbits before you go for lunch and don't forget to keep conversations like this going. Once again, Willie and Sam are going to be here for a short while more. You can come in front and just have a chat with them, take a picture with them, maybe get an autograph with them. Up to you. Thank you so much.